It's the Worldwide Sports Radio Network.
Great moments are born from great opportunity. And that's what you have here. That's what you've earned here tonight.
Forget about the crowd. It's the size of the school. Their fancy uniforms. And remember what got you here. If you put your effort and concentration into playing to your potential, to be the best that you can be, I don't care what the scoreboard says at the end of the game, in my book, we're going to be winners.
On this team, we tear ourselves and everyone else around us to pieces for that inch. We claw with our fingernails for that inch because we know when we add up all those inches, that's gonna make the difference between winning and losing.
It's down to the wire with Errol Marks and Speedy Petey.
Oh, Petey! Oh, Petey!
On the Worldwide Sports Radio Network.
Well. Long Island, New York, and around the country. This is Down to the Wire. I'm your host, Errol Marks, my co-host, Speedy Petey, or a.k.a. Mr. Tidy Whitey Man himself. Nope. Yes, sirree, Bob. What's going on, Jimmy Jardine? Remember, you can listen to our show every single Monday from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. New York Eastern Time, only on the Worldwide Sports Radio Network. You can go to our website at www.worldwidesportsradio.com. Download our app. How do you do that? You go to, very simple, www.worldwidesportsradio.com. You can go over there and you can find our app, or you can go to iOS, which is WWSRN, which is Apple, or Android, Worldwide Sports Radio Network. Speedy Petey, how was your weekend, buddy, old boy?
Well, you know most of it went because I spent about 6 hours of it with you yesterday. You and Scott, who's going to be with us very soon on our network.
It wasn't 6 hours we were with him.
No, not with him, but also doing other things. So it's been busy for the most part. It was weird when I was waiting for you today, though. There was actually this stray dog running around for a little while. So
a stray dog? Where?
Apparently a dog walker was outside. It got off leash, apparently, and then it started wandering into my grandparents' front yard. I'm like, what? What is that? Because I've seen cats around. I never saw dogs, though. That was a first.
Who's seen King of Queens? Does anybody know King of Queens?
I would hope so.
Well, who was the father? What was his name?
Arthur.
And what was he doing? He was dog walking. Who was walking him?
Holly.
Holly was walking Arthur. So maybe we should find you a dog walker.
It's not my dog.
No, them walk you. We'll find somebody that can walk you. I think you need a little bit more attention. I think that's what you need. You're Speedy Petey, the great Speedy Pete. I think you need more attention from women. So maybe we find you a woman dog walker. Yeah, I think you...
If I'm on a leash, what is that going to really do?
Well, you need to be on a leash sometimes because you're all over the place half the time. But anyways, we have a great show lined up for you guys today. We have no guests. So this is all about sports today. It has nothing to do with any of the guests, and we love our guests. But today, I know a lot of fans have been saying that we don't really get enough into the content of the show like we used to. So what we decided to do today and throughout this week is really stick to the content. The only guest we're going to have today, quite possibly, is Mark Kelly at the end of the show. So we are strictly going to go on the content and sports radio for today, so stay tuned for that. So first things first, we want to get into this whole J.J. Watt deal. Now, J.J. Watt, there were stories coming out. There were 3 teams left that he was interested in. One of them, Buffalo. The other one, Tennessee. And obviously the Green Bay Packers. And I was very surprised today when it came out that he has chose his team. And that was the Arizona Cardinals. Now, it was definitely a curveball. Nobody would have thought that J.J. Watt was going to go out west. I really thought, well, it was Green Bay. So if you want to say Green Bay's out west, Green Bay was definitely. I thought he was going to stay more here over here eastern side. So I was very surprised that J.J. Watt took the Cardinals. Now, a lot of people don't understand why. Now, let's just go into why he chose the Cardinals, because it makes a lot of sense to me. You have Kyler Murray, arguably one of the best young quarterbacks in the league. You have Hopkins, who's arguably, first of all, very close with J.J. Watt because they played together over there with the Texans. That's one. Number 2, you have arguably the best wide receiver in the league. You have a very good running game. This past year, their running game was ranked in the top 10. They have a real, I guess you could say, rejuvenated offensive line. They're a better offensive line than they were the last couple of years. And they have one of the best young defensive teams in football. Now, I know a lot of people are probably sitting back and wondering, well, how does J.J. Watt fit with that team? Well, obviously, they have Jones over there. And Jones, I think he tore his ACL.
Yeah.
He tore his ACL last year. He will be back this year. You put him on one side, and then you put J.J. Watt on the other.
And he can also play interior in 4-3 defenses and nickel defenses, too.
You have arguably the best defensive ends in football now. And I'm not saying defensive ends as far as talent is concerned, but when you have one guy like Chandler Jones on one side, and then on the other side you have J.J. Watt, you have a tenacity of pass rushers that can come at you interior and outerior. So I look at all the weaknesses the Cardinals have had in the last couple of years really was, besides Chandler Jones, they didn't have any guys that can get to the quarterback. This has been a huge problem for them for years. Now you have an intangible like J.J. Watt. And by the way, John says Cards got a bright future, no doubt. And they do. They absolutely do. And by the way, Speedy, you should be answering the questions and reading off all the special guests and what they're saying right now on our feed, not me.
All right.
So
I was told not to interrupt you, but okay.
No, you're not. But you can read it off to me when I don't have to read it off. Gotcha. So I look at the Cardinals. They're in one of the hardest divisions in football. It's a very good division. You have San Francisco, you have Seattle, and obviously you have them. And the other team, and Tampa Bay. If you want to say Tampa Bay, they are the Super Bowl champions. And the Rams. Okay, so you have arguably the best, and it's not Tampa Bay. I'm sorry, the Rams.
Seattle and the Rams. Yeah,
Seattle and the Rams. So you have arguably the hardest division in football. The Rams adding Matthew Stafford really adds a little bit of pressure on the division, because now you have a quarterback that can make the throws and do the things that you expect that a quarterback needs to do. Now, I like Jared Goff. I'm not a huge fan of his, but I like him as a player because his numbers show that he can still play in this league. The fact is that Matthew Stafford's numbers are definitely comparable to Jared Goff's. Now, obviously, Matthew Stafford could be and should be a better quarterback with that offense, but only time will tell. But you add J.J. Watt to that defense with the Cardinals, with some of the young linebackers and the safeties that they have and the ability that they have now to get to the quarterback. They have a very exciting offense that can get that you can use in open field. You can run the ball. You can throw the ball. The Cardinals are as dangerous of a team in the NFC than any team in football.
Now, here's the thing that I think the benefit of it the most is the reason the defense, I think, fell apart in the second half of the season last year was because they had to blitz so much because they had no Chandler Jones. And that diminishes the value skill-wise of their top linebackers. Devondre Campbell, who's more of a coverage type, run-stopping type. Obviously, Isaiah Simmons, who they drafted in the first round. When they have to blitz more, they're limited in other areas. And their corners are good, but they're not like world-class amazing corners that I would say. They're going to be like shut down no matter how good your pass rush is or how bad your pass rush is. And the other question is, will they re-sign Hassan Reddick? He's a free agent at the end of the year too. And personally, I don't know if they necessarily need him, for one, and number two, with Watt now there, it probably means he's on his way out.
It's so interesting when you go and you look up and down their roster. Now, J.J. Watt is a fantastic pass rusher. There's no question that he is. I believe if you look at J.J. Watt's numbers, and they don't lie, J.J. Watt's numbers run against really bad defenses. I mean, bad offensive lines. Go look over the years. He averages between 3 to 2.5 sacks a game when he is on against the really bad offensive lines. Now, that doesn't mean that J.J. Watt can't go against a good offensive line and dominate. We've seen him do that. But again, J.J. Watt is a little bit older. He's, 32, 33 years old. Right. He's a little bit older in age, and obviously has lost a little bit of speed, a little bit of strength. And I didn't think he fit with Buffalo. I didn't think he fit with Tennessee. I didn't think that he was going to fit with Green Bay, even though he's from Green Bay.
He definitely fits with Green Bay just for the
I thought he fit more with Pittsburgh because the fact is that his brothers are there, and I think the fact that they're going with the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to be losing possibly one or two pass rushers in free agency, I thought J.J. Watt would have fit very, very well over there. But I don't think J.J. Watt thought that he had a chance of winning a championship over over there with the Pittsburgh Steelers, because if he did, he probably would have picked them.
Not only that, the Steelers, the way their defense is structured, they have decent interior defensive ends right now with Stephon Tuitt and Cameron Hayward, who in their primes obviously are not going to be J.J. Watt, but with J.J. Watt obviously getting older now and being injury prone, I don't know how much playing time he'd get in comparison to those guys either. And he isn't really fast enough to be a linebacker type in a 3-4 defense. That's why I think scheme-wise Green Bay was the best fit. Even if he wasn't going to have the sack numbers, he at least was going to help their run defense. And Green Bay desperately needs help inside because Kenny Clark's the only thing they got there. And their run defense, as we've mentioned many times on this show, has been atrocious.
And I know a lot of people are looking at the balance of powers right now in all of the NFC and the AFC, because you're looking at the quarterbacks. We don't know what quarterback is going where. Russell Wilson is available. Who knows if he's going to be traded or if he's going to stay with Seattle. If he stays in Seattle, Seattle's still a dangerous team in that division. You talk about Deshaun Watson, who everybody keeps talking about. He doesn't want to play over there with the Texans. Is he on his way out to the NFC, or is he going to stay in the AFC? There's so many question marks right now in the NFL, especially this offseason, and free agency doesn't open up for another month. So again, we're trying to question what these teams are going to do and how they're going to attack free agency and how they're going to attack the draft, especially with the quarterbacks that are going to be available in the draft and pass rushers. There's not enough pass rushers coming out of this year's draft. This is not a deep draft when it comes to pass rushing. So J.J. Watt was a big person, a big availability in free agency. And before free agency even opened up, he signs with the Cardinals.
Yeah, this is a deep free agent class, whether you're looking for outside or 4-3 type defensive ends, and Watt can play both. We've seen him play both with Houston. At this point, again, he's probably just the power rushing guy exclusively, and I expect him to be that with the Cardinals because the Cardinals are not as good inside as they used to be, and also their outside pass rush at times had some good young players, so they're going to move him around. Vance Joseph had a hybrid defense last year. He had a hybrid defense when he was in Miami, and they had that great season when they made the playoffs in 2016, so I expect them to be moving around, but yeah, that definitely fills a need where they're not going to have to reach on a defensive lineman in order to have to not blitz and trust Taylor Jones to stay healthy.
John says, do you think Watson would really sit and lose 20? No, he's not going to lose $20 million. I do not believe Deshaun Watson is going to sit for the season. I do believe that eventually the Texans are going to have to make a decision on what they're going to do with him. Now, I do believe that he will give them a list of teams that he'd be interested in going to because he has a no-trade clause. So he has to waive that no-trade clause to go wherever he thinks, where they think they can get the best deal. Now, there's two teams that really stand out, the Jets and the Miami Dolphins. Now, Miami, being that they drafted Tua last year, I don't know if I see Miami just deciding to trade away a guy that had the number one jersey sales in all of football last year. He's a huge fan favorite over there in Florida. I don't know if I see Tua being traded over there to the Texans. I don't see Tua leaving Miami. So I don't know if it's going to be Miami, but it's either Miami or the Jets because they want the second best quarterback in this class. And the only way they're going to get the second best quarterback or possibly the third best quarterback in this class is if they draft at 2 and 3. So to me, the lead team right now for Deshaun Watson is the New York Jets. It's not even a question. You can't even argue that. Now the question is, do the Jets want to give up on Sam Darnold? And we've said this over and over again. Everything that I've read, you're not going to hear anything from Joe Douglas until he sees the pro days and he decides if any of these quarterbacks fit LaFleur's offense or Saleh's offense. I don't know where they're going. I don't know where the Jets are going to be pushing towards Sam Darnold, Deshaun Watson, or maybe a Zach Wilson or a Justin Fields. I don't know what the Jets are planning to do because I'm not an inside guy. I'm not a fly on a wall sitting in I'm sitting at Joe Douglas's office building. I don't know. So I don't know what the Jets are going to do. But I do know this. With free agency as big as it is this year, it's bigger than it ever was, especially last year. The last 2 seasons, the free agency market has been crap. It has been absolute crap. This year, you have some good offensive linemen that are going to be available. You have some good defensive linemen that are going to be available. You have some corners that are going to be available. You have some wide receivers, finally, that are going to be available. And I'm talking about wide receivers, pass rushers, guys that are game changers. As you saw with J.J. Watt, he is a game-changing player. Now, I was very surprised that he signed as fast as he did. But you know what he did? He set the market because Now he signed a 2-year, $31 million contract. He's making about $15.5 million a year. And now Judon and all the other guys that are going to be available in free agency this year, they're going to demand more. J.J. Watt is an older player. He's 32, 33 years old. Judon is in the prime of his career at 26. You have all these pass rushers that are going to be available that are in the prime of their career. So J.J. Watt just set the number on where these guys are going to be looking to get their contracts. And I do believe that adding J.J. Watt to the Cardinals, they are one of the favorites coming out of the NFC now. They are. And they have a tremendous amount of money that they can spend this offseason. I think they're in a top 6 or top 7 availability when it comes to cash. And they have a very good, I think they have 8 or 9 draft picks this year where they can solidify where they are, the weakness of their line and weakness of their secondary. So I think they're going to be a very, very dangerous team.
Jimmy says in the comments, Watson would not lose $20 million. He'd lose $50,000 per camp day, okay, and $650,000 per preseason game. Yeah, based on those factors, you would think he might hold out at least till the trade deadline based on that type of tenure, because Watson's contract's already massive to begin with, and whoever trades for him is obviously going to take it on. They can't get rid of him at that point. So yeah, that from that perspective, maybe that ends up being the whole case. So maybe you see him sit 5 games or something like that, and then you saw certain running backs do. Maybe you see him start to play when he thinks, all right, I'll get traded now.
I don't know where a lot of these teams and a lot of these players are going to decide where they're going to go, especially the only person that can make the decisions on where Russell Wilson is going to go. Russell Wilson is going to be the main factor. If he wants to be traded and he's telling Seattle that he doesn't want to be a part of this organization moving forward, well, then that's what's going to happen. He's going to go elsewhere. They're going to move him. Russell Wilson is 32, 33 years old. He obviously doesn't like the fact that they haven't built an offensive line around him for the last, decade. And he's been running for dear life. He's not the same quarterback he once was. He is getting older. So he's got to start using more of his arm and less of his legs. And you're seeing it that more and more times all the time, he's running for dear life. So Russell Wilson is definitely a guy that you're going to be watching, and where he's going to be going either in the market, or if he's going to stay with Seattle. Now, I look at the New York teams, and I'm wondering what are the New York teams are going to do in free agency. Now, the Jets, we've seen what Joe Douglas has done. We've seen what he's done over the last couple of years. Especially the 2 years that he's been here. In free agency, he brings in guys for 1 year. He brings in guys for a 3-year contract where he can opt out of their contract after the first year. He brought Font in. It looks like he's probably going to keep Font. McGovern, they can opt out of McGovern's contract after his second year, which is next year. So they're not going to sign big, long contracts to free agents. By the way, John, are you reading some of the things that John said? Read it out, man.
Can't wait to say year 2 with Kyler and DeAndre, only up for where it was and was still tremendous. Yeah, if they don't collapse in the second half of the season, that was the biggest problem. But yeah, definitely. It was weird. After that Hail Mary game, they kind of lost momentum at that point. And Jimmy says, I think Houston flinches first, though. If they trade Watson before the draft, Houston get a replacement quarterback. If they wait and he holds out, yeah, of course. They're going to have to go with A.J. McCarron. That's a pretty sad thought. Yeah, the longer they wait, they're really not getting anything back. And Josh has been saying it recently on the Weekend Crunch, too. Watson, being he has a lot of leverage, might be telling these other organizations that are willing to trade for him, don't try to trade my future either, which is absolutely true, especially for a young team like the Jets or a team like the Panthers, the Broncos, we've heard. Teams like that are very young, yeah, they're not going to want to do that either. So, yeah, the Texans have to jump on any trade offer they can get right now that's legitimate, because you're right, it's going to get a lot worse, Jimmy.
And they're not going to do that. The Texans aren't going to just jump in and say, you know what, I'm just going to trade away one of the best quarterbacks in the league, one of the most talented quarterbacks in the league for nothing. They're not going to do that. So they're going to sit back and relax and see what's going to happen when the free agency market opens up, and where guys like Sam Darnold could go in a trade, or Jimmy Garoppolo if San Francisco decides to buy out his contract or opt out of his contract and release him. I mean, there's so many objectives that could happen and so many factors that could happen where you don't know. I mean, Russell Wilson could wind up with the New York Giants. I mean, Russell Wilson can wind up with the New York Jets. Russell Wilson might decide, you know what, If Seattle decides to bring in some offensive line help, Lindley or one of those guys, that can absolutely solidify their offensive line and maybe tell Russell Wilson, you know what, we're trying to build around you, we're trying to protect you, so stay here and we'll do everything we can to do that. I don't know what some of these teams are going to do. So you look at Joe Douglas. Over the years, the New York Jets have been known to open up their mouths to the press and the media knows everything before it even happens. Now, you haven't heard anything from Joe Douglas's camp. You haven't heard anything from Robert Saleh. You haven't heard from Mike LaFleur. You haven't heard anything from Joe Douglas. So this shows you the professionalism that some of these teams are going to be holding moving forward, especially the New York Jets, which has been a clown organization.
Jimmy says this is why Carolina isn't in the running for Watson. Yeah, they'd have to give up a lot of picks. Yeah, of course. We know that. I said Carolina would only be in the running if they end up doing well in free agency. And if they do well in terms of filling in defensive holes, they have a lot of defensive holes. I think they only have one player left, and Shaq Thompson, that was a big factor on that Super Bowl defense. That was it. So if they fill those holes with the money they have with the pass rushers like we mentioned and the top linebackers, top corners in free agency, then they have a little more leeway to trade those picks, especially if the price drops for Watson. But yeah, early in the process, not so much. The Broncos are another team that's in kind of that same situation too, because they need a lot on defense.
And that's why when you look at the big picture in free agency and where some of these teams are going to go in free agency, it's going to be stat quo. When you talk about the Jets need pass rushers. So the first thing they're probably going to look at in the free agency market is probably offensive line help to help out Sam Darnold if they decide to keep him, or Deshaun Watson, or Zach Wilson, whoever they decide to bring in or be their quarterback moving forward this year. They're going to try to build through the trenches. That's what the Jets are going to do. You've heard what Joe Douglas believes when it comes to free agency, and you know that you cannot build your team around free agents. You can't do that. You have to build around the draft. And that's what Joe Douglas said when he took this job. He's all about building around the draft. All the successful teams, the Patriots, the Baltimore Ravens, the Denver Broncos, all these teams that we've seen over the years that have been successful throughout the place, even the Seattle Seahawks, right. they built around the draft. So now you're looking at the big picture. You have to make sure that even looking at this year's draft, it's nothing's going to stick. Even in the first round, some of these guys we didn't even get a chance to see this year because the season was short, or they didn't even have a season. Like Jamar Chase, we didn't get a chance to see Jamar Chase this year, and he's arguably the best wide receiver in this year's draft class.
Best linebacker who I went for the Giants, Micah Parsons, didn't play this year. One of the best corners, Caleb Farley. Yeah,
I mean there are players that we haven't even seen all season long that could be first-round draft picks. We could see players in the third and fourth round that should be first-round talents. And they fall to the third and fourth round because they didn't have a season this year, or they had a half a season this year. So it's so interesting when you look at the free agency market, and then look at the draft and where these teams are going to go and where these GMs are going to go. Especially when you see Carson Wentz go to Indianapolis, you're seeing all these quarterback frenzies. Now you're hearing stories coming out from Green Bay that Aaron Rodgers wants out. So I mean, we're talking about elite quarterbacks going to different teams this year, which is the first time we've ever seen this in years. I don't think I've ever seen this.
Now, John says, do you really think Russell Wilson would leave? He thinks it's more of a wake-up call. If it was just noise, maybe. It could be just that, just to maybe put awareness into the organization. Because, like Errol was saying, Seattle's normally more of a homegrown, talented team. The problem is they also draft very weird, too, and I think that's finally caught up to them, where because they don't have as much star power, those other players have not filled in as well, especially on the defensive side of the ball. Yeah, they brought in Jamal Adams. Yeah, they brought in Carlos Dunlap, guys like that, but their team defense was not very good, especially in their secondary. So eventually that has caught up to them, and maybe they have to take more conventional picks as a result. And we've seen teams kind of have that good middle ground because of that now.
CJ says, how do you guys feel about going after Brissett as a backup quarterback for the Jets? The Jets haven't had a good backup quarterback in a very long time. Joe Flacco wasn't a good backup quarterback. If you want to say, what's his name again? Who's going for the coaching job for the Texans?
Oh, Josh McCown.
Josh McCown was a good backup quarterback. I guess you could say Josh McCown was a good backup quarterback. But all in all, the Jets have never had a very a good backup quarterback. So is Jacoby Brissett a guy that the Jets are going to look at? Probably not, because they drafted a quarterback in the fourth round last year. And they expect at least that he is going to be backing up Sam Darnold, Zach Wilson, or Deshaun Watson. So I don't know if they're going to go after Jacoby Brissett, but all in all, I don't think it's a bad move if the Jets added Jacoby Brissett. Just make sure you don't have to overpay him.
Right.
I mean, you have to make sure that, and you know this, and I know this, Speedy, that Joe Douglas is not going to overpay anybody in free agency. We saw it last year. He is not one of those guys, and he rolls the way the Baltimore Ravens rolled in all those years where he was working under Ozzie. So he is going to do it the professional way. If he's going to overpay players, he's going to overpay his own players. He's not going to overpay any free agents.
Yeah, and again, he might do one for a premier position like a pass rusher because the Jets desperately do need one. But
I don't think he'll overpay for
that.
him.
Would be you're right. That would be the only thing if he does. I don't think he'll badly overpay. I'm saying slightly. I'm saying just to get it, but. You're right. He's not going to badly overpay. The only problem the Ravens had was with player development was wide receivers. So that's maybe one thing that could be concerning, especially with the Jets having free agency receiver issues in the past. But that would be the only thing. In terms of Brissett, CJ, I think it'll be later in the process if they do get him because I don't think the backup quarterback's going to be a big priority because there's so many quarterbacks that are available. And also, again, with all these new random trade rumors, who knows will be the next guy who wants out.
Well, also, when you look at free agents, and I'm trying to bring up the free agency market right now and who's going to be available, where you can look at some of the players and where would they fit in a 3-4 defense or a 4-3 defense, and where does it make more sense. But, Speedy, bring up the free agency market so I can kind of skim through some of the players that are going to be available this year. As far as, when you look at the quarterbacks, it really doesn't matter. We all know where the quarterbacks are as far as that. Running backs, you have Todd Gurley, Brian Hill, Kenyon Drake. Kenyon Drake's an interesting running back, and I'm going to tell you why. If you've seen what he's done in the last couple of years with Arizona, I think Kenyon Drake would be a good secondary running back.
Kenyon Drake's an interesting one. The problem is he's so streaky year to year. So.
How about Phillip Lindsay?
That's nice if they could get him. He's had a nice steady number 2 running back type role. So can he get back to the feature role is something that you have to wonder about. But 2018 was a very good rookie season for Phillip Lindsay. So if that ends up being the case, they could get good value because he's not going to cost much.
And how about this? There are players like Tevin Coleman, who's a guy that would fit the New York Jets very, very well. And I think the Jets would definitely look at Tevin Coleman on the cheap. You won't have to overpay him. Jerick McKinnon, he's a guy that a lot of people like, especially from San Francisco. Leonard Fournette, I've been saying this over and over again. He's going to want a big contract. Jordan Howard is a good running back that's going to be available this offseason. Jamar Miller is available this offseason. So there are players, running backs, that are not going to be overpaid. Running backs never get overpaid. Right. Aaron Jones is going to be looking for a big contract. I don't think he's going to make more than $4 or $5 million. I just don't. I don't think anybody's going to overpay him. James Conner, I think he's on his way out of Pittsburgh, especially this past year.
Yeah, I wouldn't risk him anyway. He's very injury prone.
Yeah, and James White's available. That's interesting.
That is intriguing because the Jets also could complement somebody like Perine if they want to keep developing Perine with a decent pass-catching type back. And that's what makes Tevin Coleman a very intriguing option, too. Skill-wise, I think Coleman is better, but he might be a little more pricey. But James White has been consistent, obviously, with the Patriots.
And then, oh, by the way, Jim Jardine says, would you pay Aaron Jones from Green Bay? As a Jet fan, no. I wouldn't pay Aaron Jones. You know Aaron Jones. If Aaron Jones leaves Green Bay, and Green Bay will probably offer him between $4 and $5 million a year, which will probably...
You're not going to get him with that.
the Jets aren't going to get him for that.
No.
If he leaves Green Bay, he's probably going to want between $7 and $8 million a year. And I don't think the Jets are going to offer that, especially Joe Douglas. So, no, I don't think... I wouldn't overpay Aaron Jones. I don't know if Aaron Jones is the missing piece to get the Jets in the playoffs and cause havoc over there in the AFC East. I don't think he's a missing piece, so I would not overpay for him.
I think Jones is going to demand probably between $10 and $12 million, I would imagine, for the level of running back he is.
He won't get it.
I think he could get it depending on the right team. But yeah, the Jets are not that right team because the Jets need a lot of other things, especially since this free agency market really tends to their biggest needs with wide receivers. We talk about Allen Robinson, Juju, if Chris Godwin doesn't go back to Tampa, which, again, if they have money problems, they might not re-sign him. And then the pass rushers, especially, we've been talking about Judon a lot. You got Justin Houston, Yannick Ngakoue. You got Carl Lawson, Trey Hendrickson if you want a younger guy. And another guy I mentioned, you could probably get him the cheap because he was on the cheap last year. For a veteran guy is Everson Griffin, who's always been productive wherever he's gone. So
John also says, I think he's seeking a way more than 7 to 8. LOL. He wants CMC.
He's not going to get that,
money.
but I think he could get double digits, like low double digits per year, because he is a good, consistent running back.
He is not getting more. If he goes anywhere, if he leaves Green Bay, and I don't think he's going to make 7. Did anybody watch what he did in the playoffs last year? Did anybody watch what he did in the Super Bowl? I mean, in the NFC title game. He did nothing in the NFC title game against a team that he should have ran all over. And that, to me, was a big part of it. You're not going to overpay a guy like Aaron Jones that kind of money if he doesn't show up in the big game. I'm not paying him. I'm definitely, if I'm the Jets, I'm Joe Douglas. You think I'm going to pay him $12 million a year when he didn't show up in a big game? That to me, that's no way, Jose. I'm not doing that.
But how much of that was them being behind 20
It doesn't matter. It doesn't. They took him out. He didn't even start. He wasn't even running the ball. They took their second and third option. They ran the ball more than Aaron Jones. He dropped the ball twice. Twice. He fumbled the ball and gave the ball up. You can't pay a guy $11 or $12 million when he can't hold on to the ball in the big game.
I'm not saying every team should. I think there could be some teams that do end up going for it wherever they're in that situation where they feel like that running back could be their missing piece. I don't think Jones is going to get any more than 12, and I don't think his average market value is going to be 12, but I think it's possible that he could get that from the right team because he's a very talented, well-rounded running back, and durability was a concern his rookie year, but that's really been it.
First of all, we all know that every running back that left Green Bay never was successful. Every one of them. Go name every single running back that has left the Green Bay Packers.
Yeah, but how many of those running backs are actually good?
I don't care. Because to me, Aaron Jones could... First of all, the Green Bay Packers offensive line was one of the best in football. If you put Aaron Jones behind the Jets offensive line, and I'm not saying the Jets offensive line is bad, but are they as good as the Green Bay Packers right now? The answer is no, they're not. The Green Bay Packers had 2 offensive linemen that were Pro Bowl players. The Jets didn't have one. So, again, if you put him with the Jets, how much better is he going to be with the Jets? The answer is he's not going to be any better. He might be worse. So,
yeah, but again, the Jets are not the team that I think
I'm just saying
him.
I'm just answering what Mr. Jardine has been saying. Would you make a move as a Jet fan and bring in Aaron Jones? Are you reading it? Are you not paying attention?
The other argument was
man.
the whole market value is going to be about $4 to $5 million, which I don't think would be the case. If he wants to maybe take a pay cut to go to the Jets, yeah, that's different. But I don't think the Jets are really in that market because the Jets have a lot of other things that they can get. I think that, again, the teams that are going to be looking to go after him, maybe maybe a team like Arizona, if they let go of Kenyon Drake, maybe that's an option for them, for him to look at, because again, they're only a few pieces away because they're really developing nicely, like John was saying earlier in the show. That's a team I could see that could go after him. A team maybe like the Chargers that have a lot of pieces in place. Austin Eckler really wasn't a good pure runner for them. Maybe they need a more pure runner type like Aaron Jones. Maybe that's a team. But yeah, the Jets are in other positions where they have to go other things, especially with the edge rusher talent.
I look at the wide receivers. You have Juju, you were mentioning. There are a couple. Kenny Golladay is going to be a good player. Chris Godwin. There are good wide receivers. Corey Davis is going to be available this year. He wasn't as good as we thought he was going to be when he was drafted, as high as he was in the first round.
Really high as he was drafted.
But it doesn't matter. I think that if he goes to another team, a wide receiver, you can see a wide receiver go to another team and explode depending on the quarterback and the quarterback throwing to him. Running backs are different because you're running behind the offensive line. If the offensive line is not that good, you're going to depend a lot on the running back and his speed and his agility. I would bet on more of the wide receivers that are going to be available this year, the Jujus, even Deshaun Jackson, if he could stay healthy. He could be a dangerous player for a team to be a second or third dairy option. So to me, this year is going to be a pretty damn good class of wide receivers that are going to be available. And by the way, Antonio Brown is available in this class as well. So this has a lot of depth when it comes to wide receivers that can really solidify some of the teams and the weaknesses of some of these teams, including the New York Jets.
Yeah, and there's a lot of teams that have a lot of money that need their wide receivers. I think with the exception of the Broncos and the Panthers, I think every other team that has a lot of money needs wide receivers, including the New England Patriots, who are going to be getting a lot of players off the books this year, and they have a big need for wide receiver. Miami, the Jets, San Francisco, if they want to go after a receiver to go with Ayuk, that's another team that's very interesting in the mix. And again, being that the Jets, it's their biggest need, they're going to push even harder, or one of their biggest needs, they're going to push even harder for it. But again, there's also going to be other teams like the Ravens, or maybe that's the last thing they need. Maybe, we don't know. But they're very talented. The Saints are in that boat. And Philly, when healthy, is very talented too, but they need receivers badly as well.
And there's a lot of good edge rushers, like you were saying, Speedy, in this class. Olivia Vernon is going to be available. He's 30 years old, but he can give you a secondary type of pass rusher, like the Jets. Mm-hmm. The Jets need a secondary. They need a second, a third, and a fourth. So Olivia Vernon, you're not going to have to overpay Olivia Vernon because he is 30 years old. He didn't have a good season last year. You bring him over here at a Salah's offense, especially a 4-3 defense. Mm-hmm. You can actually give him an opportunity to really solidify his career. So there are a lot of players like Judon that's going to be available. I'm just looking at some of the players that are available right now.
Jimmy brought up Romeo Aquara as another young guy. That's very
Vic
interesting.
Beasley,
he's not a number one type, Jimmy, but again, he could be definitely a nice number two.
Vic Beasley is a guy that really stands out to me. I've been saying that over and over again. And I'm going to tell you why Vic Beasley, he's had 2 really bad seasons. And he comes from a 4-3 defense. I think with the Jets and Robert Saleh, if anybody can figure out why Vic Beasley is not the same player he once was when he averaged about 18, 19 sacks in that season, I think the one person that could figure it out is Robert Saleh. Look at what Robert Saleh did with San Francisco this year with all the injuries they had. They had about, I think, 10 or 11 defensive injuries this year, and he still had the 5th all-around best defense in all of football. That tells you how good of a coach he is defensively. That tells you that he can find guys that are sitting on the bench and actually can play his defense. And some of these guys that are going to be available in free agency are not bench players. They're actually great players that can actually fill in the roles that the Jets need. Jordan Jenkins, a Jet who's probably not going to be resigned, had, I think, 7.5 sacks this year.
Yeah, he's more of a 3-4 guy. I think they'll let him go.
I absolutely. There are players that are available that is going to fit some certain teams. Bruce Irvin, who I think is old. He's not the same player.
Yeah, he's a platoon guy at this point.
Yeah, he's a platoon guy, but there, Jadeveon Clowney that's going to be available again this offseason. Seattle's going to be looking for a pass rusher. I'm telling you right now, Seattle's big problem defensively all season long was the pass rush. They decided to give a walk away from Jadeveon Clowney, and you saw how bad their pass rush was this year. They actually had one of the worst pass rushing teams in all of football.
If they didn't have Carlos Dunlap, it probably would have been historically bad.
Dunlap
saved him in the second half of the season.
If they didn't have Adams. I mean, Adams was their leading pass rusher. He was. I think he had 8.5 sacks.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not saying much with Jamal Adams because they're
second.
They're still one of the worst secondaries in football.
Well, yeah, because they had to blitz him for whatever reason. Ken Norton not being very smart and using him as a linebacker when you have a horrible secondary. Yeah, good job.
So
you ruined the Raiders' defense, now you ruined the Seahawks.
I look at the defensive linemen that are going to be available, the Justin Ellis. I mean, there are players that are going to be available where you can solidify, but you can't build your team around free agents. This is why it doesn't matter how much money you have. Let's say the Jets have about $85 million with the CBA, or I don't know what the cap is. I don't know what the cap is.
It was
this year.
projected to be 96. Obviously, there's more roster cuts that could come, but right now it's projected to be 96, which is second to Jacksonville.
Okay, so they have $96 million to spend. If they go after, let's say, a Lindley, or they go after Lindley and Tooney, okay? Those guys are going to be asking for about $15 million a year, each of them. That's $30 million off your cap. And I don't know if Joe Douglas is just going to throw away money this year, because next year's free agency class is not that bad either. And the year after that is not that bad either, too. So if they plan to win a championship and solidify their team moving forward and be a championship competitive team, not only through the draft, but through free agency, they're not going to throw away money like that in the first year that there's availability like $95 million.
Not at the same position either. I don't think they're going to spend on both Lindsley and Tooney, or even Brandon Scherf if he leaves Washington, who's a very good guard. I don't think they'll spend both of them, but definitely one of them would be a help. The only thing I could see the Jets doing is maybe doubling up with the pass rushers just because they need it so much. Even the receivers, I think you could trust, if they get the number one guy, you could trust Denzel Mims if he stays healthy to be a number two. You still have Crowder there who's productive as a slot guy. So even that, I don't think they will double up on. I think pass rushers, just because it's, especially with the edge, such a big need for them to help out Quinnen Williams. That's the only thing I could see them doing. Maybe getting a young guy like a Trey Hendrickson and then doubling it up with somebody like you were mentioning, Vernon, or somebody like that, a veteran guy that could be cheaper.
I also look at it, and by the way, John was saying, have you guys heard any news on what's going on with Ertz? Ertz is probably done. He's probably done with the Philadelphia Eagles. I could see him going to Indianapolis now that obviously Carson Wentz is there. Pittman is there. I mean, he has some good relationships over there with Reich. So I do believe he's on his way out. Ertz probably will go out to the AFC, and I think Indianapolis would be a perfect fit for Ertz. Also, the Buffalo Bills would be a very good fit for Ertz as well over there. So there could be a lot of different places that Ertz would fit in. As far as teams like the New England Patriots, the New England Patriots are going to be looking for a quarterback, either in the draft or free agency. If Jimmy Garoppolo becomes available, if he gets released, they're going to snag him up. They're not going to go after a Trey Lance. Now, if they can't get a Jimmy Garoppolo, they're going to draft a quarterback in this year's draft. And I think Trey Lance would be a perfect fit for them. The problem is, I don't know if Trey Lance will be there where they're drafting. They're going to have to move up to get a Trey Lance. The question is, who's going to trade up with the New England Patriots and help Bill Belichick and the New England Patriots when New England over the years hasn't helped anybody? So, so I don't know where they go and what they do. And I see Jeff saying stupid things about the Jets. This has nothing to do with the Jets. We're going through some of the teams and some of our opinions on where some of these teams are going to be looking at when it comes to free agency and the draft. And New England, there's going to be a lot of consumptions on where they're going to be going in the draft, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, they've always been like that the last 3 years. Like, we always think they're going to take a quarterback, and they never do. And then they take someone surprisingly in the 4th round, like somebody like a Jarrett Stidham. Yeah, we never know, like, when is it going to come for them finally. So that's very interesting. Jimmy, I just want to respond to your comment. I know Lindsley's a center and Tooney's a guard. I understand that. I'm just saying, being that they're both going to be high paid at their positions, I think the Jets need the pass rushing more. Now, if they miss out on some top pass rushers, yes, maybe they go that way. But I think they really need the pass rushing more, where that should be their first priority.
I think that they have the opportunity to make a lot of moves in free agency. I just don't know if Joe Douglas is going to open up his pockets this offseason, especially when we've seen what Joe Douglas has done in the last 2 years. Even though he overpaid a retired offensive lineman $9 million his first year, and he did absolutely nothing, Joe Douglas has not been good in free agency. He's been really, really bad. And that, to me, I don't know what Jet fans have not seen. And I like Joe Douglas. I think his first draft class was amazing. I have not really seen any big pickups that Joe Douglas has done in free agency, including Pierre Desir, who they got rid of in the middle of the season when they gave him a 3-year deal.
Well, that was the Ravens, too. The Ravens were like that as well. They could not find a free agent receiver when they've always needed one. The Ravens, for a while, when they had all those secondary injuries, they couldn't find, like, not homegrown corners to bring
Bolden.
Besides Bolden, that's really the only one. Like, how many times did they try to get a big name receiver or like a well-known type receiver, and they really steamed out because of injuries or because that whole system just didn't work for receivers. That's really the only weakness that they have. But again, the Ravens are the same kind of way, where they kind of go for the hit or miss type free agents because they draft so well, and that was what Douglas was doing with the Jets too. Except I think with the Jets they did a lot more younger guys.
I'm reading what Jeff is saying. New England is going to draft a New York. Jeff, I understand you like to be funny, but it has nothing to do with what we're talking about. But they won't. Jimmy Jardine says, but they won't be high paid. Lindsley will be $12 million, and he will be a steal. Again, everybody is trying to make their own thoughts and try to argue their points on where the Jets are going to go in free agency. We don't know what the Jets are going to do. Nobody knows what the Jets are going to do but Joe Douglas and maybe a guy like Robert Saleh. That's about it. And the question is, when you look at where the Jets are they ready to win next year? The answer is no. The question is, how much will Joe Douglas open up Pandora's box to possibly solidify the offensive line, solidify the defensive line? And I think I look at Judon, I look at some of the players that are going to be available. I think they're better off going after pass rushers, which has been their weakness for the last couple of years. That's why they brought in Robert Saleh, because the perception is what the Jets have been over the last couple of years is they haven't had a good pass rusher. The last one they've had was John Abraham. And what was that, 20 years ago?
Way back.
That was 20 years ago. So we don't even know. We don't know where they're going to go when it comes to free agency. But again, when we look at some of these teams, especially in the NFC, I look at the NFC East. You look at the Giants. What do the Giants need in free agency? One of them is a wide receiver. And I do believe Robinson is a guy that they're going to have their eyes on. A lot of teams are going to have their eyes on Robinson because he is the best wide receiver available in free agency this offseason. Kenny Golladay, another guy that really stands out. Now, are the Lions going to franchise him, knowing that they got a guy like Jared Goff there, that they need a wide receiver that's going to help out?
And they're losing other guys too. The Jones is a free agent. I think their slot receiver, I forget his name, that used to be with Green Bay. He's a free agent. So I think they have no choice but to try at least to do it.
What running back do you think the Jets will target? John Ferris says. And my answer is Tevin Coleman. That's why I think a guy like Tevin Coleman is a guy that would fit in the Robert Saleh / Mike LaFleur hybrid offense. From a guy like Kyle Shanahan, who had Tevin Coleman, who did very, very well in that offense.
When healthy.
Yes. So Tevin Coleman, you're not going to have to overpay for him. No. You pay him $1, $2, maybe $3 million a year. You get him a 2-year contract. Maybe you give him a 1-year deal, and you bring him in as your number one guy. You have LaMichael Piron, and then you draft somebody like Harris or somebody like that, either in a late first round, early second round, and then you solidify your running back position. Mm-hmm. So I don't think they're going to make a move when it comes to free agency. Any big names that are going to be like an Aaron Jones. I don't see the Jets overpaying for a running back. No. I don't see that.
And the Ravens' approach to running backs when Douglas was there too, they signed a lot of different types of running backs. So I think expect Douglas to maybe try to look for specialties. Maybe they get one pass catching back like James White or Tevin Coleman, and then they complement it with a power back, and then maybe they draft a running back later, or again, you prioritize the one running back with Coleman, draft another guy, I would say maybe like the third round. You have all those extra third-round picks. You got one from the Giants. Maybe Najee Harris in the second round if he falls to the Seattle pick or whatever it is. That's a great value if they could get him. I don't know how far he'll fall, but he'll be there, definitely the first second-round pick the Jets have, but maybe not the second one. But it's still a lot of options for them to do. But Douglas and the Ravens, when he was there, liked to platoon guys after big-name guys like Ray Rice. Obviously, we know what happened to him, and Jamal Lewis when they were gone. Guys like that left. It's been platoons, and it's worked. Justin Forsett for one season.
And by the way, Jeff is making a joke. Jeff is making a joke, and you and that stupid crow laugh. Could you stop with it? Darnold to the Pats, and there are some truth to that. I've heard that the Pats have reached out to the New York Jets about Sam Darnold and his availability. I don't know if the Jets are going to trade him to a divisional team, especially the New England Patriots, but wouldn't that be crazy if Sam Darnold gets traded to the New England Patriots and Josh McDaniels offense and Bill Belichick? I wouldn't want to see Sam Darnold. Jet fans, you've been begging for the Jets to go after free agent quarterback like Deshaun Watson or Zach Wilson. Could you imagine after playing Sam Darnold twice a year and he solidifies or figures out his game with a good coach and a good offense and figures it out and becomes a Super Bowl champion? I do not want to see Sam Darnold win a championship with the New England Patriots. And there are stories coming out that quite possibly could happen. So Jeff says the Jets need Zeke. By the way, at the end of the season, the Cowboys reach out to the Jets about Zeke Elliott. And I don't think the Jets are going to take on that contract. I think that's a horrendous contract. But again, you can argue your points on where the Jets are, and I'm not even talking about the Jets. I'm talking about free agency and some of the teams. Miami's going to be a dangerous team this offseason. They really are. They have 11 draft picks this year and going into this year's draft. They have the Texans third. They have 2 first-round draft picks like the Jets. And you look at where they are, they're just missing. They might be a player or two away from being a really dangerous team.
They need offensive
in the AFC.
Skill players, I think, especially.
They need a wide receiver and possibly a quarterback. And the question is, if they don't believe in Tua, maybe they go after a Deshaun Watson. Maybe they go after a Jimmy Garoppolo when he becomes available. Maybe they go after a quarterback like Justin Fields or a Zach Wilson at number 3. Who knows where they're gonna what they're gonna do? The Miami Dolphins are very close. They're very close. They're very well coached. Brian Flores is one of the best young coaches in the NFL, and you see what they're doing. You're seeing that they're trying to structure where this team is going in the future. So they're a scary good team, too, defensively, too.
Yeah.
Scary good, if anybody watched them in the second half of the season.
Yeah, their defensive free agents that they got brought in last year really worked out, and that'll help them in the development process where they don't have to go after as much defense in this free agency. Could they use one more pass rusher? Yeah, sure, because there's going to be bigger names that are out there this year than there were last year when they got Shaq Lawson, they got Emmanuel Ogbah, guys like that. But in terms of the offense, that's where they have to prioritize. Gaskin was a nice player at running back for them last year. Is he a full-time guy? I don't know. You got Mike Gesicki at tight end. Beyond that, they're really not set with the offensive skill players, and I think that's the priority they go after. So they're a team that's interesting if Dallas is really shopping Ezekiel Elliott. I don't know how much they're really doing that. They're a team that's intriguing to do that, to give them because they need that pure runner type, and they complement Gaskin well because Gaskin's a quicker type guy and a good pass catching back, and Zeke is more of a power guy. And no beef, he would not do as well on that offensive line.
What are they going to get for Ezekiel Elliott? They're not going to get much because they're going to have to get rid of that contract.
Right.
I could see the Rams maybe making a move for him. They don't have much to trade.
Yeah.
Maybe. The Rams need a running back in that kind of offense. Ezekiel Elliott, a power back that could do the things that he can do on a Sean McVay. In a Sean McVay offense, that could happen. Miami, John Ferris says Miami at 3, Chase and Harris at 18. That makes sense. I mean, Jamar Chase is one of the best wide receivers in this year's draft class. Didn't have a season. He sat out for COVID-19. He's a dangerous, but he might not be the best wide receiver in this class. A lot of people believe that Smith is.
Mm-hmm.
So
Smith with Tua. That makes a lot of sense too.
Yeah, but I don't think Smith is going 3. I think there's a better chance of Chase going 3 than Smith going 3.
I think if Miami doesn't take a receiver,
Philadelphia is going to get Smith.
I think that's a possibility if Miami takes an offensive lineman, or maybe they trade back or something like that, because their pick is going to be enticing to trade back with too. If the top 2 quarterbacks go as they should, or even if the Jets don't take a quarterback and they stick with Sam Darnold, and then all of a sudden other guys are more available. So there's other options there. I think if Miami is going to take a wide receiver in their current spot, not necessarily if they don't trade back, but in their current spot, it would be Smith.
So when you look at some of the teams that really stand out or are Super Bowl contenders, Speedy, you look at the teams, what are some of the teams that are missing 1 or 2 pieces that could be in free agency that could solidify where they could be in the next season when the season starts? Who do you think that stands out where 1 or 2 moves can make them a Super Bowl contender?
San Francisco's one. They really need a receiver to me. One more receiver to go with Ayuk, and then some secondary depth. That's really all they need, because I know they lost Saleh, which could hurt them defensively, but they still have a lot of talent on that defense. And offensive line is still nice. Their running game is obviously going to be good as long as Shanahan's still coaching there. And again, as iffy as Garoppolo
you and your Shanahan lovers, man. I think he's so overrated.
We know.
I think he's terrible.
I'm not arguing that again, but yeah,
you don't have to. He's terrible.
Well, we're not doing that again. But
you don't have to. I just told you he's terrible.
Don't repeat yourself. But they're one.
You repeat yourself all the time, so why can't I? Why can't I?
I don't, but okay.
Oh, you don't? You do it all the time on this show. You repeat yourself over and over again, and you say the same thing over and over again. That's what you say. You talk, and Kyle Shanahan is not a good coach. I don't care what you say, and Kyle Shanahan will never go into the Super Bowl again, because if he does go to the Super Bowl again, he is going to lose, because you know what he's going to do? Like he does every single Super Bowl, as an offensive coordinator and as a head coach, he stops running the ball. That's what he does, and that's why he never wins.
All right, let's go back to your other question, because we're just going to go in circles on this for our entire lives. Mm-hmm. Another team I could definitely see being that kind of piece is Tennessee. I think they just need a couple defensive pieces, because Tennessee has a very good offense, and we saw progressions with A.J. Brown last year. I know Ryan Tannehill had a dud in the playoffs, but he still had a nice season. Defensively, they just need a lot of pass rushing, and again, this is a pass rush heavy draft or free agency class, and if they get 2 guys, they double up like I said the Jets should, they could be good, because their secondary is still talented, and their linebackers are very good. So I think they were really just badly missing the pass rushing help. So they complement it with, maybe they get a Judon and they complement it with a veteran type guy like a Griffin or something like that. Well, not really Griffin, because he's not really a 3-4 guy, but a veteran guy. I could see them being a very good team, because they're the most talented team in that division, and they're still one of the most talented teams in the AFC.
And remember this quarterback that is going to be available this offseason. I quite possibly could happen. Kirk Cousins.
Really?
Yes, I think he's going to be available, and a team, and we've heard over the last year that San Francisco would absolutely make a trade with Minnesota to get Kirk Cousins over there, because I think that could be the missing piece of their Super Bowl contention. Even though I don't think they're going to win a Super Bowl, I don't think Kyle Shanahan is the Super Bowl type of head coach. We've seen it already. I've seen enough of Kyle Shanahan. I don't want to see any more of him in the Super Bowl. But Kirk Cousins could really solidify that offense and solidify that team. especially in a Kyle Shanahan offense. But Minnesota extending his contract. We've heard some stories coming out of the locker rooms over there in Minnesota during the season that a lot of players aren't getting along. Kirk Cousins, we've heard, hasn't gotten along with some of the players like Thielen over the years, and obviously one that went over there to Buffalo. So there's so many things that could happen this offseason that really stick out. It really does. And Jacksonville has a ton of draft stock this year, and they have a load of money. And with Urban Meyer there, they're going to try to win as quick as possible, because how long do we think Urban Meyer's going to stay there? I mean, well, with everything.
For more reasons than one.
Well, here's the thing. As soon as they start losing, he might have a heart attack and say that he's done. So Urban Meyer is going to try everything, every time, and every possible way to try to win a Super Bowl as quick as possible. I just don't know if the possibilities are going to fall to that, because Jacksonville is a really bad team, Speedy.
Yeah, now they're the interesting counter to this whole free agency, because they have all this money, yet they have decent receivers. They have decent tackles where they don't need to spend a lot on offensive linemen. And even their pass rush isn't terrible, where that's the area they're going to go after. It's the linebackers, the corners, they need a lot of that help on defense, because I know they drafted some nice young players, but again, they're not going to be there yet. And they still need a more complete team. And obviously, what they're going to do at quarterback, they'll probably draft Trevor Lawrence. So we know that already. James Robinson's a nice piece at running back. So they're going to have to spend a lot on defense. The problem is the strength is more with the pass rush than the offense in this free agency. So that's going to be hard for them. They really have to pick and choose well. And they have a new GM, too. That's going to make it a big test for him right away.
I do. And by the way, John Ferris says, what about the Colts? I think the Colts are going to be very dangerous. I mean, adding Carson Wentz to Frank Wright's type of offense. And everybody knows Carson Wentz's best years were with Frank Wright over there in Philadelphia. A matter of fact, I believe Carson Wentz was the MVP that year before he hurt his knee. And obviously Tom Brady won the MVP and then went all the way to the Super Bowl and lost against Philadelphia. But the argument here is when you look at the Colts, they solidified the quarterback position, and in Carson Wentz. They have one of the best offensive lines in football. They have a great running game. They have a bunch of good young running backs. They have some good wide receivers. T.Y. Hilton will probably be re-signed on a cheap contract. Yeah. They might bring in a Robinson or Juju Smith-Schuster. They have Pittman, who's throwing. Carson Wentz and him are throwing the ball with each other, practicing already with one another. And they have one of the best defenses in all of football. Pass rushers. They have arguably the best a linebacker in football in Leonard. Yeah. I mean, this is a good defense. And they still kept Eberflus, who's one of the best defensive coordinators in football. So they're going to be a very dangerous team. When you look at Kansas City, they're going to stand out. I'm looking at Tennessee. They're going to stand out this year, too, because they're going to still be a good team, even though they're going to lose some interesting pieces in free agency. Buffalo's going to be a good team again this year. Don't count out the New England Patriots. They lost a lot of big pieces to COVID-19 this year. 9 starters. They're going to be a better team this year, having a full season and a full roster. Pittsburgh, I think they're going to be on their way down. I think I do too. Yeah. I think even though they're going to probably bring back Ben Roethlisberger, it's going to affect their salary cap. They're not going to be able to bring free agents in, and it's going to cost them. They have no running game. Are they going to draft a running back? Maybe they will, but you can't bet on the running. They've
drafted him the last three of the last 4 drafts, and it still hasn't done anything. So who knows?
Baltimore, I expect to be good again this year, even though they're going to lose some pieces, because Baltimore always adds to the draft. They're a very good drafting team. Cleveland's going to be a dangerous team. They're going to be a very dangerous team because they have money, and they still have a lot of talent on that team. A lot of talent.
And look how much talent played very well in the first year of a system. That's hard to do for a lot of these teams, and especially defensively, Cleveland's guys played very well. I could see them winning the division next year.
And also, you look at Kansas City to be obviously another dangerous team. The Los Angeles Chargers. I think they found their quarterbacks, Justin Herbert. Maybe in free agency they bring in some offensive line help, some defensive line help that they need, especially secondary help that we saw in the second half of the season that they could not stop a lick. Maybe it's a free agency there. Maybe a Peterson or something like that, a veteran type of player like that. And the Denver Broncos, it's wishy-washy with them. They don't know who their starting quarterback is. Are they going to go after Deshaun Watson? There's stories coming out that they don't have the money to get Deshaun Watson, and they don't have the draft stock to get Deshaun Watson. So there's so many things that can happen in just the AFC and the NFC. The NFC is just so open. It's so open. The Washington football team, hopefully they get a name this year.
No, they're not doing it this year. They said they're putting it off until 2022, and then they're going to have this big reveal.
Ooh, I can't wait to see this terrible logo that they're going to be. It takes them 3-4 years to make a logo, and it's going to be terrible.
Come on, Sentinels.
But you look at the NFC East, it's still open. Washington football team, they had one of the best defensive teams in football in the second half of the season. They played very well, even in the playoffs against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They're going to be a dangerous team. They got to decide who their quarterback is. Are they going to bring Alex Smith back, or are they going to move up and try to draft a quarterback? Also, the New York Giants, where are they going to go in free agency? Are they going to go? I don't think they need defensive help, even though they have to bring Leonard Williams back. It's really the offensive side of the ball. They need to add offensive line help. Obviously, you saw their rookie actually played well in the second half, but their offensive line is terrible. Hernandez was a bust. Absolute bust.
He played better, though, this year, though.
He was a bust.
I think the main areas they need a center, because that's been a problem for them since Sean O'Hara retired. They have not had that. What is Nate Solder going to do? He's come out and said he wants to retire now, and even if he does play, he's going to play well.
That's good for the Giants.
Is he going to?
Yeah, that's good for the Giants if he retires.
Yeah, but you still need a right tackle regardless, because they don't have.
They have money
else.
then. They have $9 or $10 million to play with.
The other thing I would consider going after, I know they say they don't need a lot of defense, but an edge rusher is still something they could go after, because Marcus Golden got traded. Lorenzo Carter was nice, but he got hurt. And is he really a number one type guy? And then a middle linebacker, a coverage type linebacker to complement Blake Martinez, because Blake Martinez is a great run tackler and pass rushing type, A-gap type rushing middle linebacker, but he's awful in coverage.
And then there's the Dallas Cowboys. And there's a lot the Dallas Cowboys are going to need to do if they plan to win. First of all, they better sign Dak Prescott. This is ridiculous. Are they going to extend the contract with him? Are they going to give him a franchise tag? They have a week to franchise him. If they don't franchise him, he can go to free agency. And if he goes to free agency, there will be a bunch of teams lining up for Dak Prescott. A bunch of teams, because he is a good quarterback. I do believe they're going to franchise him. I'd extend him and give him the contract that he wants. I don't think you have to pay him more than $32 million a year. He's not getting a $40 million contract. He's not a $40 million player right now, especially coming off a really crazy injury. In Philadelphia, what are they going to do at the quarterback position? Now, obviously, they drafted a quarterback in the second round. He played well, taking over Carson Wentz. He's a running quarterback. Hurts is a running quarterback. That's what he is. He's just like Lamar Jackson. That's what he is. He's Lamar Jackson-esque, but he's not Lamar Jackson. He's not as fast as Lamar Jackson. So they're going to have problems at the quarterback position as well now that Carson Wentz is over there in Indianapolis.
Yeah, it'll be funny if the Cowboys don't re-sign Dak if he ends up going to Washington, because Washington does that all the time. They love to take ex-NFC East players.
Yeah, and by the way, Lyle says they need a line. The Giants do need a line.
Yes,
they absolutely need a line. Absolutely. And to me, free agency is not where you find that line help. You need to do it in the draft. And there are some good offensive linemen that you can find, especially middle of the pack guards that you can get in the second and third rounds that could solidify your line. Yeah, absolutely.
I think tackles will be more of their priority if they want to go for it in the early rounds. Maybe day 3, I could see them doing for more interior. They definitely need a center, though. In terms of the draft, if Parsons is not there, because that's the guy I want, if he's there at 11, I don't know if he will be, then maybe they could go for, I know Josh was bringing up the Northwestern tackle. There's 2 from Texas A&M that are in this draft as well. Maybe that's an area they could go in, or they could maybe try to trade back and get extra picks and then accumulate a bunch of linemen like that. So.
Watch out for Carolina. I'm telling you right now, watch out for them. Because they got money this offseason. They have money, and they have draft stock. And obviously, they have the 8th pick. They're not getting a quarterback at number 8. They could get Trey Lance, probably. If they like Trey Lance, they can get him in the 8th. At 8? He's definitely going to be available. I don't know if I draft Trey Lance at 8.
I wouldn't either.
But you're not getting Justin Fields, and you're not getting Zach Wilson at 8. There's no way in hell you're getting those 2 guys, because these 2 guys are going to go in the top 5, top 6. They're not falling. I'll be very surprised if Justin Fields and Zach Wilson fall to them. So
definitely not both of them.
No,
nonetheless,
one of them. Just one of them. I don't think they're going to fall.
I don't either.
I think you're going to see 3 quarterbacks get drafted in the top 6. That's what's going to happen.
I think if Carolina's going to get a quarterback, they're going to have to jump to Miami's pick, maybe to steal it from their division rival in Atlanta, who, they're always a wild card.
Lyle says bring Dak to the Giants. That wouldn't be a bad move for the Giants. It really wouldn't.
I would embrace that.
It wouldn't be a bad move for the Giants, even though a lot of Giant fans don't like Daniel Jones. I think Dak Prescott could absolutely help them at the quarterback position, especially with the offensive coordinator there. So, and he knows Dak Prescott very, very well, and Dak Prescott had very good numbers over there in Dallas.
His first year.
Yeah, he had very good numbers both years when he was there. So I think that could be a good move for the Giants if they got Dak. But he's not going to the Giants. The Cowboys would never allow that to happen. Never. Never, 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 never. And the Chicago Bears. This offseason is so important for the Chicago Bears, especially at the quarterback position. Now, the only place that I could see Sam Darnold going is the Chicago Bears. Now that San Francisco, there's stories coming out from John Lynch that Jimmy Garoppolo, he's not getting released. He's going to be starting for San Francisco. And if he does get released, he's probably going to go to the New England Patriots. The only team that really stands out to me if the Jets are going to look to move a Sam Darnold is Chicago.
That might be your one chance of getting a first-round pick because we've seen Ryan Pace do some strange things.
I mean, if you look at it, Nick Foles is there. You have Trubisky, who's going to be let go. Yeah. So they need a quarterback. And to me, where they're drafting, they're not going to get one. And with the coach that they have right now and moving forward, they need a guy that can make the throws in the open field and move and throw on the run. Sam Darnold is very good quarterback throwing on the run. The problem with Sam is staying in the pocket and making plays in the pocket, which is problematic. So,
and good luck with that. You're gonna have to run for your life in Chicago too, because they don't have a very good line either.
Lyle says that was my girl, Alvin S. idea. I don't know what that means, but
yeah. Well, you have a girlfriend named Alvin. That's interesting.
But like I
Maybe
said,
it's a chipmunk.
The NFC West is the best division in football. I mean, just go up and down. If Russell Wilson stays there, you have Seattle over there. You have Los Angeles over there with Matthew Stafford. You have the Cardinals now with J.J. Watt and Kyler Murray, and then San Francisco. That is the best. That is the best division in football. That's going to be a crazy fun division to watch because only 3 teams could really make the playoffs, and chances of 3 teams making out a division are very, very hard.
I've seen that. I can remember 2 instances where we've seen a division have no teams under 500. The NFC East in 2007 and the NFC South the following year in 2008. I could see that this division being it because I think Seattle's the worst team, and they're still always pesky and good at home where they can win those games, or they'll still probably be 8-8 at the very worst.
Now, I do want to get into some basketball conversation because a lot of people are very excited with New York basketball. Mm-hmm. They really are. Well, the Knicks right now are tied in 4th place, if I'm not mistaken.
They're a half game up for 4th place. There's 3 teams tied a half game back at them, 5 through 7, which is the Celtics, Raptors, and Heat, I think it is.
When you look at what's going on right now in the Eastern Conference, and the Eastern Conference is very wide open. It is extremely wide open. And the New York Knicks are in 4th place, and you're talking about 2 weeks, so a week away from the All-Star break, and the New York Knicks are in a top 4 team in the Eastern Conference. Who would have thought that Tom Thibodeau was going to get this team with a bunch of young players, one of the youngest teams in basketball, with their superstar, Julius Randle, leading the way right now, and R.J. Barrett tailing behind him, really developing. And I'm so sick and tired of listening, if the Knicks get Bradley Beal, trade R.J. Barrett. Why would any Knicks fan right now want to trade their young, talented player, their young power forward, or 3, or you want to say 2? You can put them anywhere you want in that offense. An R.J. Barrett. Now, the question is, when you look at the New York Knicks and where the New York Knicks are going to be in the second half of the season, their season's going to get a lot harder. And they're going to have to play a lot of more Western Conference teams, and they're going to have to travel more out west in the second half of the season. So, Speedy, when you look at the Knicks and you look at Julius Randle, R.J. Barrett, Emmanuel Quickley, I want to see them use Emmanuel Quickley more at the end of the game. We haven't seen enough of that. Yeah. And I want to see more of Obi Toppin. I want to see more of some of these young players and the growth of some of these young players. And we're not seeing enough of that with Tom Thibodeau. So what do you think the Knicks need to do in the second half? Do they make a trade for a Bradley Beal or a player of that magnitude to really solidify this team to make a playoff run?
I don't know if they're going to make a big splash type trade. I think they're going to wait for that for free agency. And kind of get the team more enticing for free agents to come there, and then you give them the max contracts without having to trade the draft assets. I could see them maybe going for a veteran type point guard, like a Drew Holiday or something like that, to help out. Derrick Rose has played well, no doubt about that. But again, could he stay healthy for one? And number two, will he actually get the playing time? But I could see somebody like that complimenting him well, because I think the Knicks they have a lot of draft stock right now, and they're going to have that New York vibe eventually, where guys are going to want to come there, because now we're seeing it. James Dolan is finally taking a step back from the team.
I told you that was going to happen.
Not shooing free agents away like he normally does. So finally that ends up happening, and now you're seeing a case where the Knicks have Dallas's pick, they got the Clippers pick still from the Morris trade, and they have a bunch of other draft picks, most in the Eastern Conference right now, where they could build on that and keep on to those players where they have good depth. I'm not saying their depth has been bad this year, but it's kind of been streaky. We've seen glimpses from everybody at different points because they've had different players play well. It was Austin Rivers, who I know you don't like. He played well in the beginning of the season. Now I don't
like his father either.
I don't. We know, but he played well in the beginning of the season. Now he's like lost everything. And then you had Elfrid Payton, you had Reggie Bullock, all these random veteran guys. So they play well at different times, but they don't have a consistent guy. And I think somebody like Drew Holiday can be that type of guy, that sixth man, good backup point guard, or even a starting point guard if Rose is hurt.
Yeah, and I will say this. The Eastern Conference is very wide open. And Lyle asked, when is the college draft? April 29th, my birthday, is the NFL college draft for football. So right there. Mm-hmm. As far as no way keep Barrett, I agree with you. Mm-hmm. I think the Knicks have to keep Barrett. They have to keep Emmanuel Quickley. Now, if they do go after a guy like Bradley Beal or somebody like that, you're going to have to give up a significant amount. You're going to probably have to give up Obi Toppin or a Kevin Knox and an Obi Toppin and a couple of first-round draft picks. I'm talking about 3 or 4 first-round draft picks to get somebody like a Bradley Beal, a 26-year-old guy that is a great wing player, one of the best wing players in the NBA. But again, the Knicks, they're not one player away. They're 2 players away. They need 2 other players. They need a superstar player that can give you about 25, 27 points consistently. And then they need another guy that can give you that 15, 16 points to an R.J. Barrett and Julius Randle. And now everybody's going to say Emmanuel Quickley. Emmanuel Quickley is going to give you points, but Emmanuel Quickley is a rookie. You can't depend on a rookie over and over and over again and expect him to make big shots in a playoff game, in a playoff series. You're going to have to bring in a veteran guy that's going to give you 14, 15 points. You know who would have fit good with the Knicks in free agency this year? Carmelo Anthony. You might think, people might think it's crazy.
I'm not against that.
People might have thought that was crazy. Carmelo Anthony right now is averaging about 15, 16 points right now for the Portland Trailblazers. That's what the Knicks need. If you were to add a Bradley Beal to this team, if you have Carmelo Anthony giving you 15, 16 points, a Bradley Beal that's giving you between 25 and 27 points, an R.J. Barrett that's giving you about between 18 and 20 points a game, 22 points a game, and then you have a Julius Randle giving you about 24, 23 points a game, now you have a championship competitive team that can compete against some of those teams in the Eastern Conference, like the lonely Brooklyn Nets that don't have a bench and don't have size and don't play defense. The Knicks would fit very, very well and play very, very well against the Brooklyn Nets.
Do they have enough offense to compete with that type of firepower is another question, but good strides are going to be made.
Firepower, they have 3 players that can score.
They do. And I'm just saying if they get
and they averaged all 3 players together since they've been with the Nets, average about 72 points a game. You could beat a team that's if you don't have a bench, you don't have guys, you don't have great players coming off the bench like a Karis LeVert or Jared Allen anymore. You don't have anymore a Spencer Dinwiddie who's out for the season, who they're not going to be able to re-sign next year.
And apparently they're trying to trade. Yeah, good luck with that.
To me, you looking at Brooklyn, they have no size. They got no size. So what are they going to do when the playoffs start, when it becomes a half-court game, when rebounding and defense comes to everybody's attention? Yeah. The question is, only the Brooklyn Nets are going to be able to answer that. And, oh, by the way, Steve Nash, a.k.a. Mr. Coach of the Year, is going to have to answer.
Yeah, I think we agree that the Nets are still skeptical in the playoffs. I just don't know if the Knicks are going to be the team that beats them because they still need some level of offense to be able to do it. And, yes, the Knicks have 2 very impressive all-star type players, no doubt about that. A team offense you still need a little bit of. The Knicks are still in the bottom half of the league when it comes to most of those. So I don't know if they're going to be built for a playoff series. I agree the Nets are vulnerable. I think Milwaukee, Miami,
even the Knicks.
Yeah, if Miami plays like they did last
Even
year.
the Knicks.
I don't know if the Knicks will beat them in a full series. They can make it tough. I'm not denying that. They can hang tough in certain games, and they'll win some, maybe squeak out some low-scoring games. I just don't have enough for a whole series. If it was like a single elimination, like the NCAA tournament, yeah, the Knicks could upset the Nets. Yeah, because all the pressure's on the Nets. I don't know about the whole series, but Milwaukee, Miami, even the 76ers, if they get some of their shooting woes in the playoffs overcome with, maybe they do it too.
No, and that's why it's so interesting the way the Knicks are playing defensively and offensively, the rotation of the offense, and to me, when you watch Tom Thibodeau and the way he brings in players and puts players on the bench, whoever's hot, he's playing. Whoever's not, he's not. Sure. It's pretty simple. And he plays 10 guys. Everybody sees that's what he does. He plays 10 guys. Unfortunately, since Obi Toppin has gotten hurt, he's not really been one of the favorites to come in. I believe Obi Toppin's going to get his chance with the Knicks. I do. I just don't know if it's going to be this year. I think Emmanuel Quigley has really stuck out like a sore thumb for this team, and I think that's why the guard play and the weakness of the New York Knicks over the years is the guard play. And now you have a guy like Rose, which you got for practically nothing. You have depth right now at the guard position where the Knicks can compete, Speedy. They can compete offensively and defensively at that point guard position and that shooting guard position. So it stands out. Miami, I'm very surprised that they're the 5th seed and they're not as good as I expected them to be this year. Obviously, with the short season, Jimmy Butler got beaten up in the playoffs, and I think Jimmy Butler's a sensational player. I think they overpaid some of these players. I think a lot of their players that they paid in the offseason are overpaid. And I think that Tyler Hero, slowly but surely becoming a star in this league. You can see it. He's a great shooter. He's unbelievable. And he's starting to ball handle. They're letting him bring the ball up now more. So I think when Miami gets their feet up under them, I think they're going to be a very, very dangerous team. I really do.
Yeah, and they have the defensive coaching, too, to go with that, where now that they've gotten back into that groove, where, again, they started slow because of fatigue. That was the biggest problem. This kind of weird season, that's going to happen. The Lakers did the same thing. Even though they were still winning, they still weren't seeing it like the Lakers. And the Heat definitely showed that. Now, again, do they have enough depth? Yes, I think they do. Can they get that offensive group back will be still another question, because they're still winning a lot of low-scoring games, but they're definitely dangerous with the size and with that defensive coaching, and that's the theme of the Eastern Conference. If you don't have the big three like the Nets do, every other team seems to have a lot of these nice defensive coaches. Spoelstra, obviously Thibodeau, Mike Budenholzer is a nice system in Milwaukee. Nick Nurse with Toronto, they're another one to watch out for too. If they get going offensively,
and watch out for Andre Drummond. Wherever Andre Drummond goes to. Gets traded at the trade deadline, it's going to be dangerous. And I have a feeling he's going to stay in the Eastern Conference. Boston being a team that really sticks out to me. I've been hearing the Indiana Pacers are another team that'll be interested in Andre Drummond. And also the Brooklyn Nets. I don't know what the Brooklyn Nets are going to trade for Andre Drummond, but the Brooklyn Nets have come out and said that they're interested in Andre Drummond too. It's crazy right now when you look at the Eastern Conference and where it's going. I think Boston is one of those teams that the fact that they're a 6th seed, I'm surprised. But I think they're going to be a very dangerous team, especially if they add some free into trade deadline, if they add a big man at the trade deadline, because that's their weakness right now. And Kemba Walker needs to figure things out. Kemba Walker has not had a good season. He missed OTAs. He missed the little bit of preseason that they had. And I think it's been a big problem for Kemba Walker trying to get his feet under him. And I hear all the Boston Celtic fans saying, get rid of him. He's terrible. I think it's ridiculous. He had a great season last year. Then he had a knee problem. He had knee surgery in the offseason. He's come back as quick as he has with the meniscus surgery that he had, and now all of a sudden you want to get rid of him?
Yeah, where are you going to get that offensive production from? Because the bench depth has not been as good this year for the Celtics. Their offense as a whole, the team offense has not been as good, and the playoffs especially, they've had a lot of random offensive duds, and you think losing Kemba Walker, trading him is going to be that? Unless you trade him straight up for another player of similar level, but, I mean, are they going to be in the market for Bradley Beal? Are they going to be in the market for Oladipo or somebody like that? And Oladipo and Beal both have different skills from Kemba Walker too, and they're kind of similar to the wings that they have. Obviously better, but similar to the wings they have already. They need a big man, that's for sure, and they just need to not have these random offensive duds in the playoffs like they have. That's what's made them so vulnerable. Even though they made the Eastern Conference Finals a bunch of times, it's still they struggle in the first and second rounds more than they should.
Does KP get traded?
No.
You don't think KP gets traded?
I don't think so. I think Dallas now getting on a bit of a winning streak now.
Who would you trade if? Because I've been hearing names teams like the Clippers, who do the Clippers trade for a Kristaps Porzingis? Because if you
How many
add
picks do they have left? They don't have a lot of picks either.
if you add Kristaps Porzingis with Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, that's a scary.
Oh, it's
three.
nice. I don't know who the Clippers have enough to trade, though, being that they lost a lot of their bench depth to free agency last offseason, and now they're just very star reliant. And a lot of those young players that played well 2 years ago when they were a 7 seed and beat the Warriors and
How about San Antonio? A team like right, San Antonio's having a good season. 17-12. I'm very surprised. Greg Popovich's defense. You're seeing what this team could be. And you know Greg Popovich loves Kristaps Porzingis. He also likes Ntilikina. Do you see maybe San Antonio making a move for a guy like Kristaps Porzingis?
Maybe, because again, he's got familiarity with the European players, so that's definitely a possibility. I don't know if Porzingis defensively is enough what Popovich likes. I think that kind of thing could worry me in terms of them having the best package to get Porzingis if he's available. Again, I don't know. I don't think he's going to get traded. I think Dallas will hang on to him now, but if he does get traded, I think it's going to be a team that will end up pushing for it because he's still young and potent offensively. The team that is interesting is the Suns, that I think could do that to go alongside DeAndre Ayton, because they have a lot of good guard and wing play already, but outside of Ayton, they don't have much depth with the big men, so that could be an area they go with, and their team's very young where they have pieces to move.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. And by the way, Chris Paul with Kristaps Porzingis, scary good. I don't like Kristaps Porzingis, but
yeah, we know.
Well, who likes Kristaps Porzingis? Every time you see him, if he's not playing on the basketball court, he's in the tabloids. He's doing stupid things on and off the court.
He's jumping off boats.
Yeah, he's doing stupid things. I mean, he's getting beaten up in clubs. I mean, who wants Kristaps Porzingis? Who wants that crap that you have to deal with, not only with him, with his family and his brother? Who wants to run an organization? The guy has no experience whatsoever. He's never played professional basketball, and he wants to run an organization. That's why the Knicks got rid of him. So it's crazy. It really is. When you look at the NBA season, and by the way, Portland, I'm very surprised the Nuggets have not had a very good season. They have so much talent. This is one of the most. This team has more depth than any team in basketball. They really do. If you look at the depth in their bench, who's got a better bench than the Denver Nuggets?
They're another team I think that was plagued by fatigue in the beginning of the year because they made the Western Conference Finals. Like the Celtics made the East, and obviously
knocked off the Clippers.
Right, and the Heat made the NBA Finals. A lot of those teams had those slow starts, and the Nuggets I think went through the same thing. Then they had a nice winning streak. Now they're kind of back down to earth again. But also some of the other teams in the West have gotten better too. So I don't think the Nuggets have lost to a lot of bad teams. It's not like they're having letdowns. It's just I think they're still trying to get it back into it and rise in the ranks. They're only separated by a game and a half on the Spurs right now, where there could be number 5 just as easily.
Yeah, and again, when you look at Dallas and Golden State, they're only 3 games behind each other. I mean, Golden State being that they're 19-16 to Dallas 16-16. I don't think Dallas is making the playoffs. I think as the season progresses, especially if they trade Kristaps Porzingis, they don't have anything to trade. They don't have any. They don't have any draft stock, so they can't bring in a big player like an Andre Drummond. If they trade a guy like KP, the only thing they could do to make this team better is if they trade Kristaps Porzingis. That's about it. If they don't trade Kristaps Porzingis, who are they going to trade? Tim Hardaway Jr. I mean, they got nothing.
We know they're cash strapped as it is.
They got nothing.
The Mavericks will have to make some small scale moves for depth, really, but they're not going to be able to do anything big. And I agree with you. I can't see them, unless the Spurs continue to have issues with COVID, because they've had a lot of them so far this year. I can't see them trying to steal that playoff spot. And even if you want to go the teams below them, I trust Memphis to steal the spot more, because I think they have better, not better coaching, but better young team and more stars on that team. And I mean, the Kings are still a talented team where they can make a run. I don't know if they're too far back at this point, but I think they have more all-around talent than Dallas does too.
Yeah, I think it's so funny when you look at how the tables turn. You know, it's so funny when you look at Jamal Adams. Jamal Adams, he wanted out of New York. He wanted to go to a team that is a Super Bowl contender every year. He goes to the Seattle Seahawks, and now their quarterback wants out, and they might be. They might be a rebuilding team.
If they trade Russell Wilson, they're like a 5-11 team.
Then you talk about KP. He wanted out of New York because he didn't want to be on a losing team. He goes over there to play with his friend Luka. Luka and him aren't getting along, and now he wants out of that, and Dallas wants out of him. He wanted to go to a team that was a championship playoff contending team, and they're a rebuilding team too. So all these New York players that want out of the New York teams, eventually get what they want, but get what they want 1 year and then go to another crappy team.
I don't know if Dallas is rebuilding. They're just hoping that Luka can make all the veterans that they overpaid for better.
Well, I don't think that's going to happen.
Well, we've seen that already. Their peak is a 7 seed with a bunch of different hot stretches and a lot of great buzzer beaters that Luka Doncic has had throughout his career, including that one in the playoffs. That was still insane.
Yep. Now I want to finish up, and I want to get a little bit into baseball, and we're gonna have hopefully Mark Kelly to
Mark
join us.
said he might come on. He's still not sure. He's really been busy. And,
Okay.
So we're not sure if we're getting him.
All right, so maybe Mark will show up, maybe he won't. Unfortunately, if he doesn't, maybe we'll get him on below the mic. But baseball, and I'm not going to break today, and I wanted to get all this out. People want to hear some content from us, so we want to spit out the content for you, especially over the last couple of months. We've had a lot of guests, so we're going to take a week where we're going to just give you all the content that we can possibly give you, and then next week we're going to start bringing in guests again. And we're going to have one guest a show. We're not going to do 2 guests a show anymore because we want to get the content out that people want to hear and they can argue and obviously attack us at everything that we say. But
and the NCAA tournament's coming up.
Absolutely, I can't wait for that. So the brackets, and we're going to have a bracket.
We got to have the bracket show.
We're going to have a bracket show, and we're going to do we're going to have a bracket, a Worldwide Sports Radio bracket where you can join and win some money. We're going to do something like that where everybody that goes in is going to put about $40 or $50 into the pot, and whoever wins gets the opportunity to win all that money for the bracket. So if you play in the bracket, we're going to work on that as well. Speedy and me will be talking about that moving forward. But MLB, pitchers and catchers have started. Spring training started this past weekend. It's interesting. It really is because I was arguing with Josh and his father over the weekend at his wife's birthday, his 30th birthday party. And it's so interesting because when you argue about the Mets and you try to compare the Mets to the Yankees, I don't try to compare the Mets to the Yankees because, to me, I don't hate the Mets. There's no comparison from the Mets to the Yankees because the Yankees won 27 World Series and the Mets have won how many? 2? I mean, there's no comparison between organizations, okay? So I don't argue. It's one big brother to a really small brother. But this offseason, the Mets have done a lot. They have really solidified their team as far as their rotation, as far as their bullpen help. They're a much better bullpen than we've ever seen them have with Loop and May that they added in the offseason. And then you look at their lineup. Their lineup obviously is so much better because they added Lindor and they added some of the pieces that they added in the offseason like Walker. So I look at this team. And I look at the Mets, and I try to compare and contrast what the Mets are. Now, Baseball Digest, was it Baseball Digest or what was it?
It was MLB.com.
MLB.com put the Mets as the 5th best team in baseball. The only reason why I kind of argue that is we don't know what this team is. They haven't stepped on the field yet, and people are already putting the Mets as the 5th best team in baseball when they were ranked, 17 or 18 last year going into the season? So they added 3 or 4, possibly 5 new players to the team, better players and new ownership, but are they that much better when they step on the field? That only time will tell, and when the season starts, when the 162-game season starts, what Lindor could do. How do we know Lindor's not going to break his leg or break his ankle before the season starts? We don't know. So to say that the Mets are the 5th best team going into the season, I think it's a little crazy.
Well, how do you anticipate that for a guy who's not normally injury prone, though?
It doesn't matter, and that's what usually happens when players are not usually injury prone. They get injured. We've seen this before.
Well, a lot of times later in their career, like you saw with Miguel Cabrera, he was really durable his whole career. Then all of a sudden, the last 4 years or so, he's really had those kinds of issues. Same thing with Albert Pujols when he went to the Angels. But again, usually when they're not durable or very durable at this point, usually it'll come later in their careers. I'm not just saying that because I'm a Mets fan. It's just a lot of young players, the trajectory of it. They usually either they start that way and they're very injury prone, like we've seen with Aaron Judge, like we saw with Bryce Harper in the beginning of his career. They're like that initially with a lot of the way these players.
And we've seen players at the end, in the middle of their careers or at the prime of their careers, get hurt and they're never the same. We've seen this before. Albert Pujols, if everybody remembers, Albert Pujols is one of the best right-handed hitters of all time. His 6th and 7th season, he got hurt, if everybody remembers. And then for 3 seasons, he was fighting injury. Now, St. Louis is a great team. They're a great organization, and they've built not just around Albert Pujols in those times. They had a lot of great players, and they had a lot of depth from their farm system. you have seen this as players get hurt, as players get older, they get hurt more. Now, I'm not saying Lindor is old. He's 27 years old. He's at the prime of his career. But again, this guy's going to expect a $300 million contract. And I'm not saying that Lindor is not a great player. That's not what I'm saying. But to compare and contrast the Yankees to the Mets and argue your points, he actually, Josh's father told me that he would take the Mets full roster over the Yankees. And I said he was out of his mind.
Full roster? No.
Full roster. He said that he would take the Mets roster over the Yankees.
Because that has to include the farm systems, I would imagine, as well. You're judging that, and the Yankees are definitely better in that. The Mets have done better with their young players, but still not to the level the Yankees are at.
No. And I still think the Yankees are the second best team in all of baseball, right behind the Dodgers. Now, the question is, are the Yankees going to stay healthy? And are the Yankees going to actually hit in the clutch, which has been a huge problem over and over again for the last 25 years, since the 90s?
But that's not talent-based. That's
no. And he also told me that's how the Yankees are built. They're built for the regular season, not built for the playoffs, which I think is a crock of
approach-wise, yes. They've been home run or bust a lot of the time.
Most teams are.
I'm not saying they're the only team with that problem.
The Dodgers are home run or bust.
No, the Dodgers I wouldn't say are that type of player. The Dodgers have been well-rounded for a while. There are definitely teams like that. We see the Twins go out in the playoffs because they have the same problems. Oakland, teams like that. Yeah, there's definitely more than just the Yankees. I'm just saying the Yankees, the way their roster construction is, outside of Torres, who had a nice playoffs and very well-rounded hitter, LeMahieu, obviously.
Houston, when they won the MLB championship, they weren't home run or bust?
No, they cheated.
It doesn't matter. They were home run or bust.
I wouldn't say they were in that boat either. Because Altuve was. We know they cheated. He still was a high.
He was a power hitter.
He wasn't a power hitter.
He was a power hitter.
He had a nice year power wise, but he's not really a power hitter.
George Springer, power hitter. I mean, what's his name again? The third baseman.
Bregman is a well-rounded hitter.
He's still a power hitter. There was a power. DJ LeMahieu is not a well-rounded player. Gleyber Torres isn't a well-rounded player.
Yeah, they are.
Aaron Hicks isn't a well-rounded player.
He has been since joining the Yankees.
He isn't a well-rounded player.
Right,
okay?
but I'm saying those.
Aaron Judge isn't a well-rounded player.
When he's healthy, he is. But the problem is,
they're well-rounded players. That's 5 players I just gave you that are well. Clint Frazier is not a well-rounded player.
Jury's still out on him.
Same thing with Lindor. We don't know what he could do in New York. How could you say that Lindor's going to be a great player? He's never played in New York.
You were judging the Astros before. How do you know what you were judging?
I'm just speaking the truth.
Team.
I'm just speaking the truth. You're talking about power or bust teams, and you're telling me that the Yankees are a power bust team, and that's what everybody is saying. All these teams are power or bust teams. Right now, when you look at San Diego, they're not a power or bust team.
Tough to tell right now because they have a lot of new pieces.
We don't know. Are you on drugs?
They made the playoffs once in the last 15 years.
I don't know why
we don't have a large enough sample size to judge the Padres.
No, but you have a large enough sample size to say that the Yankees are power or bust?
The Yankees have made the playoffs a lot and have continued to strike out a lot.
That's every team.
That's a lot of teams. I just said the Twins, the Twins Athletics have that problem too. I'm not saying it's just the Yankees.
Is everybody listening to the Screech over here? This is like Screech Powell's over here from Saved by the Bell. So I don't know what you call it. But again, you're looking at the off season, and now that the season is around the corner, I'm not comparing the Yankees and the Mets, but how could somebody come out and say that the Mets have a better chance of success than the Yankees do? I think it's ridiculous. And that's something that the Mets would do. A Met fan would do. And that's why I can't stand. There are two fans that I can't stand. Okay? Are you ready? I can't stand the Giant fan. I can't stand the Giant fan. I can't stand the Ranger fan. And I don't mind.
Believe me, we know.
I don't mind the Met fan. Okay? I don't. But what bothers me about the Met fan is now all of a sudden the Mets rebuilt their team. They got a new owner. All of a sudden their World Series are bust. They're
it's about time in a big market. They should be spending money.
They're not a World Series championship competitive team. They're not built to win the World Series yet. They're not. They're missing pieces. And they're not ready to go all the way to win a championship. Now, we've seen teams go all the way to World Series with bad teams. So just because the Mets aren't ready to win now doesn't mean they can't go to the World Series this year. They could. We've seen the Mets a couple of years ago go to the World Series when they shouldn't have been there.
Washington winning as a wild card when they did, yeah.
Yeah, so it quite possibly could happen. But for anybody to say that the Mets are better and more rounded than the New York Yankees it's crazy. It's absolute ludicrous. And that's something that comes from a Met fan. And I love Josh. I love his father. I think they have a great personality. They know their stuff. Josh's father is very familiar with all his sports teams. He's a Boston Bruin fan. He's a Green Bay Packer fan, and he's a New York Met fan. And he's a Knicks fan.
Very interesting combo.
It's a very interesting combo. But remember, in those days, in his days, the Boston Bruins were a great hockey team, and the Green Bay Packers were they won 5 championships back to back years. So I mean, with Bart Scott, Bart Starr. So why do you when I make a mistake, you always correct me and laugh. When you make a mistake, I don't even freaking step in. I let you correct yourself. You idiot. I can't stand him sometimes, ladies and gentlemen. If I make one mistake on the show...
And then you complain where there's a big space and I let you think.
When I make a mistake on this show, just one mistake, because I'm trying to get out all the content I can, he corrects me, and then when I let you think, you're like, oh, Speedy, why didn't you correct me?
How about I smack...
Well, no, I don't. I don't do that all the time. I only do it when I know I'm talking about something and I'm actually looking at something or reading something, trying to get information, because you don't know. So there you go, because you're the producer of the show and you should be looking it up. So anyways, going back into the arguments over here. Oh, my God. This offseason was very interesting in free agency. It really was. I think at Tampa, losing Blake Snell, it definitely affects them. Losing, what's his name again, to the Braves, Morton, it really affected them. I think they're not as good a team as they were going into the season last year. And by the way, Kevin Cash, I met two Tampa Bay Rays fans. I was going to say Devil Rays. I always say Devil Rays. Two Tampa Bay Rays fans this weekend, and they all told me Kevin Cash needs to be gone. Both of them said that, and that's a Tampa Bay fans. All you Kevin Cash fans out there that thought, oh, Kevin Cash is one of the best managers in baseball, one of the top 5. If anybody didn't watch him in the playoffs, especially in the World Series, he cost the Tampa Bay Rays a championship. So there you go. Oh, Tyler Harrison,
something better, Rays fans, if you're pleading for that.
Well, there's a lot of people pleading for a lot of. Listen, when we look at the offseason, we look at teams going into the regular season. Miami's going to be a dangerous team. I'm telling you right now. A lot of people believe the Marlins, that wasn't a fluke last year. They have a good...
That's tough to tell.
They have a lot of...
Long season.
Long season. They're right now, I know it's just a spring training. They're 2-0. They're the only... Them and Minnesota are the only 2-0 teams, and they look really, really good. I know it's spring training. But again, Miami looks good, and they have some good young power in their lineup. So beware of them, especially in the NL East. But you look at Minnesota. Minnesota lost a lot of pieces this offseason. They did. They lost a lot of relief pitchers. They lost May, who arguably was their best relief pitcher. Mm-hmm. And you look at Pittsburgh. I think Pittsburgh is going to be a lot better than they were last year. I do.
That's not saying much.
They're going to be a lot better this year, and I think they're in the division that they're in. It's winnable. It's a winnable division, even though I think St. Louis will win that division.
Again, the Pirates have a lot of holes on the roster, though. I don't know about winning the division. I mean, if they progress and maybe finish above the Cubs or something like that, maybe that would be progress. But I don't know about all the rest of the team, because the Brewers are still good. They just have a lot of offensive players that were down last year. They played well in the second half of the season like they usually do. And the Cardinals got a lot better. The Reds are still decent. I know losing Bauer is going to hurt, but they're still decent. They have enough young talent where they'll be competitive. So I don't know about that. Maybe they'll finish above the Cubs if they end up trading everybody like we think they will, but I don't know about beyond that.
That's why when I'm looking at even, spring training, and I've been watching a couple of games. I watched one of the Yankees spring training games, and the Yankees are slowly but surely going to get back. And Gleyber Torres came to spring training actually in shape, something that he wasn't last year. And a lot of people, including Brian Cashman, took shots at him that he was 20 or 15 pounds overweight. And that's why his season wasn't as good as everybody expected, coming off a season that he had 40 home runs and 40 home runs and 40 doubles or something like that, or something around that, 38, 39 home runs or something like that.
I think 34 home runs and I want to say 45 doubles or something like that.
He had a sensational
full season.
Yeah, he had a sensational full season the year before. He didn't have, but he had a great playoff run because he actually got back into shape. And the guy's an unbelievable playoff hitter, as you can see. He's a 340, 335 hitter in the playoffs. I mean, Gleyber Torres is expected to have a good season. Aaron Judge has looked good so far, what we've heard. Healthy, changed his regimen. this offseason. Him and Giancarlo Stanton are training together, and both of them trained their regimen. Hopefully they can stay healthy in a full season. If they stay healthy in a full season, watch out for the Yankees in that lineup. I mean, Aaron Hicks is healthy right now. Could he stay healthy for a whole season? The Yankees have a tremendous amount of depth. They do. I mean, especially in the farm system as well. They have a tremendous amount of depth. The question is, what is this pitching staff going to do? Taylor, bringing him from Pittsburgh, I think it's going to really, it's going to change his career. I think he's going to be a better pitcher playing with Garrett Cole now, his best friend in baseball. They grew up together in the minor leagues. And obviously Kluber, who... if he can stay healthy, Corey Kluber could be a Cy Young candidate.
Great boomer bust signing for the Yankees.
$15 million. You overpaid for a player that has to stay healthy. If he stays healthy,
of course.
Garcia could really take a step forward this year. And obviously some of the other weapons they have. Domingo Germán, who's going to be available this year to be in that rotation. Hopefully he stays out of trouble. You heard what Luke Voigt said about him this offseason, that he's on the cusp of losing the team, so he needs to show the team and show the players that he's there for the long haul and is going to keep his nose clean. But
yeah, and again, if they have depth, that's going to be key to fight off these injuries, especially with Kluber, who's been hurt a lot. Tyone, he had Tommy John surgery, then he was recovering from cancer last year, so he didn't pitch the whole season. So even if Germán has to kind of earn his spot back after what he did, because what he did was awful and unacceptable by every stretch imaginable.
Of course.
You're going to have to earn your way back. You might still have that kind of chance because of the way the Yankees have had these injury-prone type pitchers. Garrett Cole's durable. You could trust him, but beyond that, I don't know really what you're looking at when it comes to durability of this pitching staff, especially guys like Montgomery, Garcia. We've seen in a short term, small sample size type of thing. What are they going to be used as is going to be a big question, especially with a pitching coach in his second year too.
And everybody's going to make fun of me and laugh at me. All those moves that the Mets made, and obviously Francisco Lindor. Don't be surprised if Cleveland is a playoff contending team this year. I still think they have a pretty good farm system. I think that they have some good young players on the team. The American League is so weak. It is really, really weak. And even though a lot of people are picking the Chicago White Sox to make noise with the depth that they have, the pitching staff that
and Josh's boy, Tony La Russa.
Tony La Russa over there, who is going to have his chance to win another World Series. I was very surprised. But obviously, Chicago is trying to win a championship. It's boom or bust. Mm-hmm. And bring in a Tony La Russa, a 75, 76-year-old man over there back from retirement from Major League Baseball to coach your team and manage your team. That tells you it's a boom or bust year. They're expected to be a World Series competitive team this year with the talent that they have. So they're going to be a dangerous team too. The question is Tony La Russa going to manage this team the way he's managed the team, all the other teams like the Cardinals and the A's in those days, or is he going to change the way he coaches and manages to the new age of talent and the new age of game, how baseball has changed?
It's going to be somewhere in between because he was very creative at the time when he was managing. It's not like he just stuck to the old school ways when he was managing in Oakland in the 80s and the Cardinals obviously in the 2000s, but they're going to still have to adjust to some extent. Now, he did some of those analytic-based things in the front office with the Diamondbacks. And the Diamondbacks, obviously, they didn't make the playoffs a lot, but when they were in, they were always a tough out. And pitching depth is going to be key. The White Sox have a lot of that if they can keep it healthy as well, because they've had young players that have had Tommy John surgery already, too. But I think that kind of managerial boost is still going to help them to an extent. In the playoffs, it's tough to tell because the players still have to play, and the White Sox only have a one-game sample, kind of like what I was mentioning with the Padres earlier. So that's going to still be up to them, and the White Sox have a bad playoff history too.
It's going to be so fun to watch. And by the way, who is your surprise team in the AL, and who's your surprise team in the NL?
Ooh, that is a good question. I'm going to say Milwaukee in the NL because I think the Cardinals now getting the hype. I think they'll probably still win the division, but I would not rule out the Brewers just because I still think they have depth. I think they have a good manager in Craig Counsell. And if they don't trade Josh Hader and they don't trade not Ryan Braun, Lorenzo Cain. Lorenzo Cain, even though he hasn't played well, I think these are all guys that could bounce back. They have just a lot of offensive players that are right on the fringe, but I think they're still talented players. And again, their pitching staff played well at times last year with Corbin Burns. They had the Rookie of the Year in Devin Williams, who played very well. So I think they could be a surprise team. And the American League, I could see the Angels bounce back. I think this maybe could be their year because I still don't like the Astros. I still don't like the Astros, even though because I don't think they're going to play with that same chip on their shoulder like they did last year. Oakland's good, but they lost pieces too, so that division is still winnable. Where if Oakland has enough injury issues, they could steal it.
The team in the American League that really could surprise me this year, and I'm looking at some of the teams, and you could go back and forth, but the surprise team this year that could really surprise me is the Texas Rangers.
Okay.
I think they're a good young team. They have good power in their lineup and a very good young pitching staff. I think they could be very, very dangerous with the ability that they have. And I think in the division that they're in, I think the division is a very winnable division. Mm-hmm. So I think the Texas Rangers really sticks out to me. In the National League, it's going to be the St. Louis Cardinals. I know a lot of people still don't think that this team has enough depth in their rotation where they're going to be able to compete against some of the good teams. Flaherty is a very good one guy, and they have some good young pitchers in their farm system that you're going to see come up. This is still one of the best farm systems in all of baseball, the Cardinals. And they're a very dangerous team. And adding a guy like Nolan Arenado into the middle of that lineup with Paul Goldschmidt, I don't care who you are. You have the best first baseman and the best third baseman on your team, on that same roster. And you have Molina coming back, who's a great defensive player.
Really good.
You have arguably the best defensive infield in baseball. You really do, if you argue that.
Yeah, and he's going to help those pitchers out, no matter if it's expected breakouts or not. Yadier Molina has always done that, especially with the Cardinals, who replenish players very quickly. They trade young players at the right time, and they end up struggling in other places, and then they replace those pitchers well. Now, they haven't done it to the extent of a Flaherty, but who says they can't? They have a very good history of it, and they're still very well managed, and Molina works with them well. And again, even if Molina doesn't have the offensive numbers, he still is going to help in that area. And again, even if he's hitting 6th or 7th, that's still not a bad guy to have.
No, and also, teams that are really going to be really bad this year, Detroit's going to be really bad.
We know.
Yeah. We know what they're going to be. Baltimore's going to be really bad this year, as everybody knows. In the National League, there's not many bad teams in the National League.
I think the Pirates and the Rockies, that's really the two obvious
Watch
ones.
out for the Pirates.
Oh, and the Giants, too, I guess you could throw in
Watch out for the Pirates. I think San Francisco's going to be really, really bad. But in Arizona, I don't bet on Arizona. Even though they have some talent on that roster, Arizona, they just keep trading away pieces after pieces after pieces, and they overpay for pieces, and then they get rid of pieces.
Yeah, they develop players well, and then don't know what to do with them when they're up, and then they make great trades in 2019. I think they did very well with Greinke, and then they trade for Starling Marte out of nowhere and sell nothing, and then they trade Marte the next trade deadline.
It doesn't make any sense. None of it makes sense.
Commit to something. They're a decent team, but commit to something.
That's the problem. They can't commit to anything. And that's a huge problem moving forward with that organization, that team.
Especially with the way the Dodgers and the Padres are.
It's terrible. Absolutely horrible.
Good luck in that. Good luck with those two. I mean, even though you get to play the Giants and the Rockies, who might be the two worst teams in the National League.
Yep.
Then you also have to play two of the 3 best.
Mm-hmm. Then I do want to finish up with hockey. And over the weekend, the Islanders lose a big game against the Pittsburgh Penguins. And a game that they should have won. Okay, they were up 2-0. You saw Barry Trotz. I could only imagine what he is doing, what he did to them after the game, or maybe they put him through practice or whatever the heck they had. To lose a game like that, they can't beat Pittsburgh. They cannot beat Pittsburgh. They beat the Bruins. They beat the Washington Capitals. They can't beat the Pittsburgh Penguins.
I guess it was somehow to cancel out. And for years it was they couldn't beat the Bruins, but they were decent everywhere else. Now there's somebody else.
Everybody's beating the Bruins right now. Everybody.
But the Islanders have beaten them 3 times already this year, where it seemed like they won 3 times in the last 5 years against them.
Yeah, and watching New York hockey, it really stands out. The Islanders are very well rounded defensively. They're a very bad offensive team. They do not score enough goals. And when they fall behind or they have an early lead, being that you're up 2-0, you have to win those games. You have to win those games. You cannot have a 2-0 lead and give up 2 goals in 20 seconds. You can't. And Varlamov, who's played very well this year, he has played very well. Mm-hmm. He gave up 2 really bad goals, which really, I believe, cost him the game. It cost him the game. Goaltending can cost you the game just as much as win you the game.
Right.
And I don't know why we haven't seen more of Sorokin. We've seen more of Varlamov, less of Sorokin. I know Sorokin is a rookie, but I want to see more of the young kid.
I don't think anyone expected Varlamov to play as well as he has, though, either. Maybe they're just keeping him in for that reason. But maybe after these soft goals are given up, maybe Trotz will change his mind for their next game. And especially if it is a back-to-back type situation, maybe they'll test Sorokin in that way for a young goalie, because obviously goalies playing back-to-backs are never ideal, but you still have to learn at some point if you want to be a top goalie like what we know Sorokin can be.
And then the Rangers are having a lot of problems as far as their defense is concerned. They don't score a lot of goals. They haven't scored a lot of goals. Panarin might be out for a significant amount of time. They're saying 2 to 3 weeks. He could be out longer. Zibanejad he's played a little bit better, but remember he had the COVID-19 situation, and he really didn't have off-season workouts and stuff like that. So he's coming into the game, and he's coming into practicing and stuff like that, where he's really cold feet. And this team, where everybody thought that they were going to be a very good, well-rounded offensive team, they haven't been.
Yeah, they're looking like what the Islanders used to be. They always trusting the fourth line was the best in hockey. They had Tavares, but again, streaky scorers in front of them. Now Mika Zibanejad's kind of been that, where the talent around him hasn't played as well as they should. Kreider's picking up now. Nice.
Yes, he's playing
Buchnevich was great in the beginning of the season, but then he started to fall off. He had a goal recently, but beyond that, he wasn't really playing well. And it's the fourth line guys, the Colin Blackwell type of players, the Di Giuseppes, Frederick Gauthiers. Those are the guys that have played well out of nowhere, and yet all of a sudden now their third line, their second line, we thought had a lot of depth. They're not the ones playing well, which is weird. Kind of like what the Islanders used to be.
Yeah, and that's why when you're looking at some of these teams and some of the acquisitions that might need to be made at the trade deadline, do the Rangers make a trade where they can solidify their defensive side of the puck? Now, Fox has played sensational. He really has. I'm not going to say anything bad about the kid Fox. He's been really, really good. But everybody else, and I want to hear about DeAndre Miller. Okay, I've heard enough. Okay, he looked really, really good in the beginning of the season, and now he's fighting injury. And then when he's on the ice, he disappears sometimes. Speedy, he disappears.
Well, he's had a couple bad games. I think most games he's played well, which is good. And again, he's playing second line minutes, which again could be tough for a rookie type of player right away. So I would give him a little more of a pass than that. But again, he's not going to solve the entirety of the rest of the Rangers defense problems. I know Josh was saying a lot of the times that Jack Johnson was really the thing letting them down, which he struggled, but some of the guys replacing him haven't been anything better either. So that's a big problem. And then managing Jacob Trouba's injury is another problem when Fox is the only guy that's stepping up in his place. Now the teams that they've played haven't scored a lot of goals just because they're not great offensive teams, but they've also had bombarding type losses too, like the Bruins put to them on Sunday, and I know the Islanders had one of those big ones too a couple of weeks ago against the Rangers, where that ends up being the case. The Devils too, I think a couple of weeks ago beat them like 5-1. So
let me ask you this question, and before we go, do you trade Dak Prescott now? There is a story, somebody's writing a story right now on Pro Sports Daily saying Dak Prescott trade would get Cowboys a massive return. Would you trade Dak Prescott if you can get a massive return back for him and maybe move up in the draft to get the guy that you want?
That is a tricky call. Massive really has to be massive. I don't know who's going to have enough draft stock to give that return. Maybe Miami if they really...
Maybe the Jets.
Maybe they want to trade Tua. Maybe the Jets. But again, how much are those teams thinking, all right, we're just a quarterback away? You need that perfect scenario for that to happen. I don't know where that exists. In terms of a team as a quarterback.
Does he fit San Francisco?
Yeah, I think he does. It's just a matter of are the Niners going to go all in on that? Maybe if they don't get Watson, maybe that's a fallback for them. And also, what is going to be the price? Are they going to be concerned about the injury? That's why I don't know if a quote-unquote massive trade is going to be gotten from there. I just don't know if there's that perfect combo. And if there's not that perfect combo, you're already cash-strapped as it is. Give Dak the money and hope you could draft well.
Yeah, and Jimmy Garoppolo, you don't know if Jimmy Garoppolo is going to be able – they're going to be able to release him. Now, San Francisco, I don't think they believe in Jimmy Garoppolo. Okay? John Lynch says that Jimmy Garoppolo twice is going to – on two different shows says that he is going to start for the San Francisco 49ers. Maybe that quite possibly could happen. I think that it will happen. I think Jimmy will start for the San Francisco 49ers. But again, maybe he's trying to throw out a smoke screen
Right.
where he can make a move for like a Dak Prescott or Deshaun Watson or Russell Wilson or somebody of that magnitude. I don't think Russell Wilson, because they're not going to trade him in division.
No, I think that would be a really bad trade for both teams if they do that, because I don't know if Seattle's going to be able to get the draft picks they need for Russell Wilson, and Dallas, I don't know if they can afford to give all that away.
Where would you trade Dak Prescott? Who would be interested in Dak Prescott? Miami, the Jets. I don't think any of those teams.
I could see maybe a Carolina. I could see that being a fit for
Carolina?
them. Yeah, because Matt Rule's offense is kind of more of those short passes. Dak's accurate. He's not a big arm type quarterback,
Right.
but we even saw with the receivers, which we thought would be more deep threat types. They're not really that type. Rule's done a lot more of those creative short pass type offenses. I could see him fitting there. Again, like I said, with Carolina all the time, it's just a matter of can they get enough defense where they can afford to trade those picks. I don't think, obviously, Dak's not going to warrant the return that Deshaun Watson's going to warrant, but he's still going to warrant at least one first round pick, maybe two.
Where do you think Deshaun Watson goes?
I'm still sticking with the 49ers.
The 49ers.
I'm still sticking with it because I think John Lynch is very aggressive, and I feel like they're still doing that big trade.
They don't have enough to get him. They don't have enough to get him.
I still think they'll try to swing for the fences.
They can swing for the fence. They're not. Listen, how are you going? First of all, there's going to have to be a third team involved.
Maybe.
Because they're going to have to bring the Jets involved. Because the only way they're going to get Deshaun Watson is if they get that number 2. They want the second best quarterback in this draft class. That's what they want. That's what the Texans want.
Well, of course, but
you need to bring the Jets involved in that trade where you can do that. If you don't do that, why would the Jets give San Francisco, Robert Saleh and Kyle Shanahan, that possibly could happen. I mean, the Jets could get involved, but the Jets are going to need a massive amount of return back to give up that second pick.
Well, yeah, if you do get another team involved, that's another interesting thing because they could also give up other picks in addition to that. Maybe the Texans trade some other players that are disgruntled. Brandon Cooks is on a big contract. Maybe another receiver needy team gets him. Benadryl McKinney's a nice middle linebacker. There's definitely other pieces they could trade if they want to make that work with a third team. I'm saying the Niners only because they don't need much, where they get one free agent receiver maybe to help out with Ayuk. They get some secondary help. They don't really need much. So that's why I think they could afford to trade the draft picks. I know the Jets and the Dolphins definitely have the stock, but again, there's also the sense of urgency because those two teams need a lot more than what San Francisco does. So that's why I still think that big trade splash possibility is a big possibility, especially since John Lynch has been very aggressive at times, both with contracts and with trades.
I don't think they're going to get Deshaun Watson because they don't have the draft stock to get him. And that's all I'm going to say. And the Texans, there is no way. I don't care how aggressive John Lynch is. If he doesn't bring another team like Miami or the Jets involved in that trade, they're not getting Deshaun Watson. There is no way in hell the Texans are going to trade Deshaun Watson to San Francisco when there's no way they're going to get the second best quarterback in the class. They're not. They're going to have to bring the Jets or Miami involved with it.
Well, I don't know. Do they necessarily have to bring those teams, or do they just need another first round pick to? Because if they get San Francisco's pick at 12,
they want the second best quarterback in the class. That's what they want.
That's understandable. What I'm saying is if they try to get another team involved, because the Texans are not going to be good either way. So if they quote unquote want that second pick, they could get all the extra draft picks from other teams. If you want to say San Francisco and another team, like you're saying with the three-way trade, they could get other pieces there too. Who says they don't trade up for something like that, where they give up 12, maybe with a Miami, with an Atlanta or something if they don't want a quarterback? They could still get that guy. Because again, if the Jets don't take a quarterback, there's going to be a lot of different trade scenarios where they can look at. And if they're picking at 12 with still a lot of other draft picks, they could still be in the running to do that over Carolina, over a team like the Giants if they want to go for a quarterback. Certain teams like that where they could still have the extra edge for the draft capital they somehow were able to get in those trades.
Yeah, I still don't think they're going to get him. There's no way they're going to get him because, again, I'm going to go back. They want that high pick. They want a quarterback. And even at 12, they're not going to get the quarterback that they want. So unless they somehow maneuver something with the Jets or Miami and somehow trade one way or another and get that pick or get them involved in the trade, there's no way they're getting Deshaun Watson.
The problem is I just don't know if they have enough scenarios where that ends up working for them because I don't know if the Texans have as much leverage as they do. Miami still has question marks of whether they actually want a quarterback because they committed to Tua like they have said for the last 2 years. And the Jets, like we were saying in our first segment, they're notoriously stingy with guys. So who says Joe Douglas is going to like shop the farm for them. He's going to be tough on them. And who says the Texans say, yeah, no, we're not going to deal with that?
No, I don't think the Texans. I don't think the Jets are going to trade what the Texans are going to want. So
exactly, that's my point. So who says the Texans don't say, all right, we're done working with you. We'll look at another team.
Look at another team and give up less. Why would you take the 12th pick and a bunch of other first-round picks that are going to be crap in the future when you can go with the Jets or Miami, where you're still going to probably fairly get in the middle of a pack type of first-round draft picks in the future?
Well,
there's no way. There's no way.
It might be a team overpaying though, because
there's no way.
Regardless of if the Texans get their quote-unquote second-best quarterback in the draft, then you're putting that quarterback in the same situation that Deshaun Watson was in. And who says they're going to be able to rebuild it and make that?
And that's why I don't think he's going to San Francisco. I think he has a better chance of going to the Jets in Miami. So that's it for our show, ladies and gentlemen. We will be back on Wednesday. I'd like to thank all the fans that follow our shows, listen to our shows throughout the day. Again, this week it's all content, no guests. But next week, we're going to start adding some guests to the show. We're going to be reaching out to some guests. So we'd like to thank all the fans that listen to us. Lyle, Jimmy Jardine, CJ, all the guys on Jeff from Tampa, who gives me a headache half the time. All you guys that are fans of us and listen to our shows throughout the country, throughout the world, we really appreciate you. Until then, this is Errol Marks and Speedy Petey, a.k.a. Tidy Whitey Man, saying good night, and we'll talk to you then. Good night, everybody.
It's the Worldwide Sports Radio Network.